Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Magi Show. Got another really exciting guest lined up for the show today, and he's going to be helping me out with some of my research on the projects up north, like the Draco Stonehenge, the Mount Keminus or Mount Cauldron offering table, and a bunch of the other wild phenomenon that we see all over northern Ontario. I think we're going to get into meteor craters a little bit too. See what we got here. Okay. Yeah, it looks like some of the stuff we're going to cover is Prehistoric Ontario, the Sudbury impact crater, and yeah, the supernatural occurrences at Mount Cauldron. So I'm actually really kind of nervous to do this show. First time I've been nervous for a show in a while, but I guess it's because there's so much information on this show that's going to be permanent or prevalent to my research into up north. So I guess before I do anything else, I'll just read Dan's introduction here before I give him a call to get him on the show. Alright, let's see, where do I got his introduction? Oh, actually, wait, before I do the introduction too, I'm just going to start sharing a couple of the show links on Facebook. And maybe if anyone listening to the show or happens to tune in, if you could help share it in groups too, that's really makes a big difference. And going to sync up the chat here so that we can get some viewer interaction going on the show today. I managed to get a hold of the company that does my software and hopefully resolved all the issues that we've been having with the chat. So keeping my fingers crossed that today's chat works out well. And if it doesn't go according to plan, I'll just switch back and forth to Facebook and get the questions from the audience that way. Okay. So I'll disconnect the old chat and try the new one. Yeah, if anyone's wondering what those comments were before, that's just from the previous show. Every time we start up again, I got to reset all that. So, all right, we've got a viewer in saying hello already. Thanks, Anonymous, for tuning into the show. If you got any questions as we go, you can just put them down here in the chat, and it looks like it's working. Yeah, that's some good news to start the show. And next thing I'll do is I'm just going to set up the reactions so I can get some reactions from you guys in the audience too, or girls. Yeah, so I hope everyone's been having a good week. Well, there's always a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, but encourage everyone to try to stay positive and hopefully things will be looking up soon. Okay, I believe I got the live comments working too. If anyone wants to hit like or some sort of reaction in the comments, we can test it, make sure it's working. Okay, so I believe that's all set, and now I'm just going to share it with a couple groups. Yeah, if anyone has a group that they want me to share it with, it's probably best if you do it, because I've reached the point where I've pretty much maxed out how many times I can share on Facebook without getting my account banned and stuff, so if anyone's able to share, it really makes a big difference. Yeah, and I do some writing with a group called Adept Initiates. I'm sure my other regular viewers know that, but for anyone who's new to the show, encourage you to jump on Adept Initiates website and read all the excellent blogs and work that they do there. I'm definitely not the only writer there, so the wide range of topics, everything from ancient Egypt, Mexico, and my specialty is the stuff up north. Alright, so yeah, I'm just going to share that with Adept Initiates. Yeah, I've got some pretty cool Adept Initiates guests lined up to come on the show soon too, so really looking forward to getting some more of them on. Now it's kind of neat that the chat's working, but it's listing everyone's name as anonymous. Not sure exactly why that is, but I guess it's probably for the best, just in case anyone in the chat doesn't want their name spread all over the internet. Not that my show's all over the internet. That's a dream come true if that were the case. Okay, just a couple more groups to share, and then I'll read his introduction here. Yeah, and if anyone has their own group and they want me to share a post in there, you can try sending me your group name, and I'll do my best to do it. maybe one day Facebook won't be as strict, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm just sharing it to the Conspiracy Talk. It's actually some friends of mine in Montreal that run that page, so if anyone wants to check out their work, the show is going to be streamed there too. Yeah, they used to have a really cool show called M&R TV out of Montreal. You can jump into the YouTube archive and check out their work, and they did it for years and years and years, but they're actually taking a little break from doing the show right now. Alright, it's about 7 after already. I gotta hurry and share these. Now in the future I'm going to get it set up with Facebook so I don't have to share everything on the fly like this. Hopefully I can get it going in advance. But for the time being, hope you can bear with me. It's just another minute while I share it. Alright, one last group. Where is it? Yeah, this is another group a friend of mine and I are the managers of. Where is it? Infinite Knowledge and Wisdom. There we go. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Sometimes I gotta share it with my page too. Okay, on my timeline, yeah, that's the last one. Alright, thanks everyone for bearing with me while I shared those. Just nice to get some more people going in the chat, so appreciate that. Okay, next I'm gonna call Dan and see if I can reach him on Facebook. See how this goes. Oh yeah, I gotta read his introduction still. Alright, let's go. Dan LeMega is a creative consultant in the arts and culture sector. He's an explorer, an outdoor adventurer, an athlete, and he's been urged to begin chronicling his journeys through writing. He's fascinated by the supernatural mysteries of nature and civilization since his earliest memories. He studied cultural anthropology and worked as an educational and creative consultant. He was partners in a small video production company that specialized in cultural content, specifically Aboriginal Canadian First Nation stuff. That's really wild. And as well with working within the film and television production industry. And during his years, he has explored and participated in religious and shamanic rituals. And Dan has lived in various cities throughout Canada. So I guess that's what I got for his introduction here, and I'll try getting him on Facebook now. Let's try reaching Dan. Alright, let's see if I can get a hold of him. We did some test calls earlier and got everything working with a pretty smooth connection, so keeping my fingers crossed here. Voice call, and he's actually just going to be joining us on the show today on a voice call, but I'll put his image up on there so you guys can see what Dan looks like. Alright, it's just dialing now. Hey Dan, are you there? Are you there?
Good evening, sir.
Oh, hey Dan, welcome to the Magi Show. Glad I was able to reach you.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Cool.
And that was, I have to say, that was an amazing introduction you just read. Thank you very much. Did you write that?
No. No, I appreciate you saying that, because reading those introductions is probably the hardest part I have to do on the show, because I'm not really good at pronouncing stuff. So I appreciate you keeping it brief and not putting too many big words in there for me.
Well, you know, I do what I can for you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for that. You did an amazing job.
All right, thanks. Yeah, and for the viewers that aren't familiar with your work, I guess I should say too is how did we first meet? I guess you were watching the show, or just following my work on Facebook, or?
Actually, no. The way that I came across your name was I was planning to do a trek, I guess a little bit of a mini expedition up to Mount Shamanic or / Mont Cauldron.
Yeah.
Meaning Mount Cauldron, up north, And so, of course, before I go on any kind of a trip or anything like that, I start to do my studying and research, and see what's out there, whether it's current information or past information. So I started going through my search, and after a while of reading text, you get a little bored, so you start getting into the videos. I went onto YouTube, and while I was going through YouTube, I came across one of your short videos on YouTube.
Oh, sick!
And you were on top of Mont Cauldron.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly which video it was, but I think you did a few of them. It was one of them in any case, and I had watched probably 8 or 9 other videos about the mountain before I came across yours.
Okay.
And they were all, basic, kind of not to insult anyone, but cookie cutter. I'm climbing this hill or whatever. Yeah. And then when I came across yours, I mean, being who I am and having the background that I do, it definitely immediately caught my attention.
Oh.
Immediately caught my interest, and as soon as I saw some of the images and the graphics come up with the content of what you were saying, I was like,
Oh, no kidding.
Okay, I'm definitely going to tune into this video. Okay, and I watched the video, and based on what you were saying, became extremely interested in seeing kind of what your take on all this was, if you had any more information, since I was going to be going up there, and I do believe in sort of barter and trade, and that information is a currency,
Okay.
So I was looking for some information, thought maybe he has some, thought what you were providing was interesting, and definitely gave the kind of slant that I like when I go on expeditions and treks. Cool. And always one of my favorite things that I do when I go anywhere is I always check out the any folklore with the area, any lore, any folklore, whether it's modern lore or it's indigenous or older historical lore.
Okay.
And so I came across your video. I tracked you down on Facebook. And then I started sending you all sorts of irritating messages.
That's the miracle of technology brought us together, I guess.
Hey, it's going at almost the speed of light, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's really wild. Okay, and when I was reading your introduction there, it said that you began this even when you were young. So it's like, was there some sort of event that occurred, or it was just like a subject that caught your interest, or?
You're digging in there, aren't you? Okay. Well, there's kind of that answer is two-pronged in a way. There's two sides to it. One was from pretty much kind of what was in the introduction. From my earliest memories, I had an interest in all things esoteric, supernatural, so on and so forth.
Nice.
Basically, I can't go back in my memory early enough without me either thinking about it, wondering about it, having books about it, or whatever it might be.
Cool.
So that started right away. That came with me into this life. That followed me from wherever I came from before I'm here now. And it continued immediately. And I guess the other side to that answer is that I guess one thing follows the next, and like things attract each other. And I guess there were, without divulging too much, there were a few episodes in my life early on that were definitely very much out of the ordinary.
No kidding. Eh?
Very much unexplainable. Things that, when I would even breathe a word of it, basically 99.9% of the people around me did not believe what I was talking about, what I was going on about, what I was getting at. So very early on, I recognized that these these events, these episodes, these scenarios, I guess you could say, that presented themselves were unusual. Were definitely unusual, and I guess I had, as we all do when we're young, I had an instinct and an intuition about it that it was something very important, just
Wow.
to me and to the reality I occupied.
Wow.
So yeah, I saw them as very significant, that there was something very potent to them. There was something very powerful. They had a powerful effect on me.
Yeah.
And yeah, those kind of, in my life, in my memory, those episodes kind of became constellations to me in events of my life. And yeah, so I guess that's one way to put it. There's many other ways I could put it, but I'll put it that way right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe we can get you back on the show sometime to go into more detail about that. But I guess we got a lot of information to cover about the stuff going on up north first. So
there's a lot of material to cover for sure. I think what a lot of it, I think, is just kind of one topic is going to kind of lead into the next.
Yeah.
As we go. I didn't want to come in with too much of a structure to any of this.
Sure.
And again, like we talked about before, if there's anything you want to say, anything you want to ask, jump in, shut me up, shut me down, ask your question, and then we'll get into it.
Okay.
So,
sounds good. Yeah, I always like to do that with my guests because sometimes it gets a little bit boring if you don't get to interact with the guest a lot, right?
No, I like that.
Yeah.
I like
cool.
the interaction.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I'll just give a shout out quickly here to some of the viewers that tuned into the show.
Oh, absolutely.
Curtis is watching. Hey, Curtis. Natasha's watching too. Yeah, thanks, Natasha, for tuning in. If you guys want to help share the show, really appreciate it. Okay, so yeah, I guess maybe we'll just jump right into one of the first slides that I got, just to give the viewers an idea of some of the subjects and where basically geographically where all this stuff is located.
Yeah, I guess we should probably start with that because this definitely potentially has international viewers. So yeah, let's let them know where we are in this wide world of ours.
Yeah. Okay. So what I did for anyone who's just listening to the show on audio, I'll describe all the slides the best I can here. The first one that I put up is a map of Canada, just to give you an idea of which province these mysteries are happening in. I guess they're happening all over the country, but today's episode we're just going to be focusing mainly on Ontario. And Ontario here is the province that surrounds the Great Lakes. I'm sure pretty much everyone's heard about the Great Lakes before. They're the largest freshwater lakes in the world.
Yeah, just in case someone hasn't heard about them, I'm just going to jump in there just for a moment about the Great Lakes. Yep. Basically, what the Great Lakes are, to anyone that might not know, is that they are they're massive interconnected lakes.
Yeah, they almost look like oceans, right? Or a sea.
Well, I was just going to say that basically, I guess not technically speaking, but more or less everyone concedes the fact that they're basically like small seas.
Yeah.
They're like freshwater seas. They're like freshwater seas. There's several of them, and yeah, that basically when you're on them, it's like you're on a freshwater sea. They're that big when you're on them on a boat or you're swimming, canoeing, kayaking, whatever you happen to be doing. They are massive.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, and then the Great Lakes are also interconnected to a lot of ancient trade route theories. Like they connect along the St. Lawrence and go to the ocean here. So it was pretty much a highway for the old world. And there's some shows like America on Earth by Scott Walter, who talked about copper mines around the Lake Superior, which is the most northern of the lakes.
That's to put it lightly, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different theories about different people coming here for different minerals, like gold, copper, and whatnot. And man, well, I guess we're going to get into it shortly. Like just north of the Great Lakes is Sudbury, and they have a whole bunch of minerals in that spot, right, too.
Again, to say the least.
Yeah. Okay, and then here near Toronto is where I'm located, and it's neat that it's actually further south than a lot of places in the States, just because it dips so far in between the Great Lakes.
It basically pushes right into the States.
Yeah. No, we're really
and where
lucky
you
here.
are.
Yeah, we got some what is it called? the serpent mounds in Ohio are really popular, but we got some in southern Ontario as well too.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Absolutely right.
Yeah. So I guess I'll skip on to the next slide that I got ready here. And this is another image of the Great Lakes. And it's color-coded so that it shows the different depths of the water, I think. That would be
that'd be called bathymetric. It's a bathymetric image.
Ah, okay, cool. Yeah, so in this one it shows that Lake Superior, the furthest north one, is the deepest, I would assume. And then as you go south, Lake Erie is a little bit more shallow, or quite a bit more
Yeah,
shallow.
basically what those colors are showing, the gradient of the colors is the dark blue depicts the deepest, and then it goes, so it's kind of from the scale from the dark blue is the deepest, and as you go through the spectrum, the red and the yellow, orange, red, and yellow are the shallowest. So you can obviously see that the southernmost lake, which would be Great Lake Erie, is by far the most shallow of the Great Lakes, and Superior definitely has the deepest overall depth. Yeah. And then, of course, there's that almost abyssal sort of looking pocket right around the middle of it.
Yeah. Now, I was just going to say, too, that there's some really neat, indigenous legends about how the First Nations talked about, like, the Great Lakes. If you turn them slightly on their side, they actually make the shape of the Thunderbird. So I always thought that was interesting. So I just put up a slide to give people a picture. And it's neat, too, that Sault Ste. Marie is located in the center of that Thunderbird. And basically it's called, like, the heart of the Thunderbird. And that city is known as having the friendliest people. That's what they put on their sign, anyway.
You know what? I wouldn't really doubt it. It's a beautiful place. The drive there is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
The land changes so much, and then once you get down to there, you're approaching the very famous Georgian Bay, which is so picturesque and has such a unique character to the landscape that it really, like in any place I've ever been, I've never quite come across a landscape that has that particular sort of character and look and feel to it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's very unusual. The Great Lakes altogether, but especially Georgian Bay, so it's well known for that. And Sault Ste. Marie, when you're driving down there, is all about that view. You begin to see really what this land that we live on is about when you take that drive.
Yeah. No, I was lucky. The first trip I ever went up north, I hired a little private plane and we flew over Georgian Bay. So
Very nice.
The first time I got to see it was from right above it.
What a view.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, so I encourage anyone who wants to get a look at from the plane view of it too, just jump into my YouTube page, and there's a video on there called, I think it's one of my first up north trips. So yeah, if you want to just jump into the archive, you can get a look at that. Oh yeah, and here we got a slide that shows the ice shield and how, or the ice age, or that giant block of wall.
Could we pause just for a minute?
Yeah, well, what's up?
I was just going to jump in, since we're talking about the Great Lakes, and I really I like people to have an appreciation of the Great Lakes as a whole, because they are like an inland sea. And way back when, just when actually during the glacial age, during the ice age, and as the massive glacial sheet, I'm not even going to call it a sheet because that doesn't do it justice.
Okay.
This massive glacial wall.
Yeah.
This colossal wall. To me, calling it a sheet just really doesn't get the point across of how massive this glacial wall was.
Yeah, like
huge.
The magnitude, it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So way back when the glaciers were receding, there was a lot of meltwater going. All of that meltwater absolutely changed the entire look of the landscape, and it changed the land for any peoples back then. This was thousands of years ago, several thousands of years ago. It changed the land and where they would live and what they would eat and the wildlife, and how they would live and how they would migrate. Some of them that did migrate or moved with animals and seasons. It changed all of that for them. But at one time, quite a bit back in the past, all of the Great Lakes were actually a single inland sea. It's not showing it on that image. We'll talk about that image in a second, but they were once a massive inland sea.
Okay. Yeah, it used to be saltwater, I guess, way back in the day too, right?
Yeah, like going way, way back when the continent was much, much more open to the Atlantic Ocean. It was definitely had some saltwater content.
Yeah.
And I guess they kind of what I want to do with this podcast personally on my end is I kind of want to paint the picture of like specifically we're talking about Ontario right now, our province. I want to paint a little bit of a picture of this province, this land in prehistoric times, of a lot of very freaky, very strange, and very interesting features and realities that were going on at the time that most people don't think of when they think of, you know, our country or the province or whatever the case is. Their mind can't go back to where at a certain time in prehistoric times, let's say 7, 8, 9, 10,000 years, that it was a vastly different world. It wasn't just, it was kind of the same world we have now, and there were, you know, various indigenous or ancient archaic peoples living there and, you know, doing what they did kind of thing. It was a vastly different world. And at the time, and we'll talk about the Great Lakes, at the time in North America, there were a thriving population of megafauna, of giant animals, of all kinds, you know, all sorts of races and species of them. Some of them are popular, you know, like very well known, but some of them are less well known. But North America was crawling with megafauna and megaflora, giant, to us, oversized, overgrown plants, vegetation of all kinds. Yeah, it reminds me of BC, right? Like BC has that feature where the cedar trees are way bigger, the bears are way bigger, the fish are bigger. it's got an element of that. To me, to be honest, and this might sound a little strange, I almost see it as the world of Conan the Barbarian, practically. The Hyborian world, because there was massive giant animals, and some of them were carnivorous, and some of them would rip you apart in the blink of an eye. You know, some of them were very docile and grazing creatures. They weren't predatory, but in the Great Lakes, for instance, just again to give an idea of the prehistoric world of Ontario and to paint a little bit of a different picture. We're gonna move our way up into Northern Ontario more during our conversation here, but just as one example, and I think I might have mentioned this to you before, one of just to give an idea of how different a reality this was that these people were living in, and not just living in, but thriving in. So it kind of says something about the people just because of that fact. There were in the Great Lakes, and at that point when this was going on, there were 6 foot water scorpions in the Great Lakes. Okay, 6 foot water scorpions, just as one example. And this is proven. This is proven. They have many, many fossils of this creature, many remains. There's no way around it. And the other populations of these crazy marine megafauna that existed. And just to give you an idea, 6 foot water scorpions that were existing. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go swimming with those guys. I would avoid it. If you want to see that next sunset, let's avoid swimming with the 6 foot water scorpions. Yeah, really. But so North America was known for its density of megafauna and having a lot of different kinds of megafauna. So that was going on around the Great Lakes at the time. And well, that explains it, because I've heard it described as the land of giants before, and I was wondering where that giant thing was coming from. Yeah, well, we're going to get into a little bit more of why it might have been called the land of giants in a bit. But so just to kind of finish up, I guess, with that slide,
Yeah.
is that most of Canada was not just buried in the Ice Age sheet, or I'm going to call the Ice Age wall, the colossal wall
Yeah.
of ice. They were not just buried under it, but crushed. Everything was being crushed under it.
Yeah, exactly.
And there were rivers of all kinds that were forming in the ice. A lot of people just think of this solid ice wall, but it wasn't like that. There were rivers in it, there were lakes in it, there were crevasses in it, cracks. It was literally like a maze, like a massive labyrinth.
Wow.
Yeah, so again, just to sort of paint a little bit of a different picture, or kind of distort the usual picture that people have of this time.
Yeah, I know.
That imaginary border isn't so imaginary, by the way. The border between the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
Basically, Canada was the epicenter of the entire world ice age.
Yeah, it's true.
Canada was the epicenter, and that imaginary border wasn't so imaginary. That's, well, you can see in the maps and the images. There definitely was here's Canada, here's the ice, and here's what's now the United States. There was a delineation there.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. No, I hear a lot of people talk about the Ice Age, and it seems like there's still a little bit of debate about it, but I don't know, like if you go up north, you can see the lines, what are they called, skyrations, where they just literally scratch huge grooves into the rock. So I don't know if people are going to debate it, but I really think the Ice Age is legit.
Well, I think part of what the debate is that and I know a lot of people will say, no, it's established, but science is theory, science is ever-evolving theory and conjecture, and that's how it sails, that's the nature of it, and that's the essence of it, and that's good, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think one of the whole debates about it is what the nature of the Ice Age actually was. Like what was really going on? What were the details, and what were things really, really like?
Yeah, like what caused it, and why it only affected North America as bad.
Yeah, and I personally think that, like I was saying earlier, the ice wasn't just this completely homogeneous, solid, colossal wall of ice, and there was nothing in it, there was nothing going on with it. It was featured. It was heavily featured. There were fissures. It was changing as well. It was moving. It was changing. It was building. It was shifting.
Yeah.
There were crevasses. There were great cracks in it. There were massive rivers going through it, and waterfalls, and lakes, and all sorts of things. So there really was a whole kind of, probably very bizarre, if you were actually there, bizarre kind of world and a maze or a landscape to it. And I personally believe that there were some individuals, I'm not going to identify them as anyone, but I do think that just because of the nature of humanity, what we've always shown ourselves to be an exploratory people,
Mm-hmm.
a venturing, enterprising people. Whether these were, human or non-human, I'm not going to say, but I do think that there were some very particularly hardy individuals that did decide to go explore that glacial landscape.
Wow.
I think that they did go into it, and they did explore it, and some, I guess, extremely badass, hardcore individuals probably might have even resided there or stayed there or just ventured into there, maybe, at certain times of the year, or who knows. But I do think that there were some people that went into it and explored it.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that, because
I think they've pretty much proven that in Northern Europe, in Asia, I think, that there were people that were, for whatever reason, you'd think, oh, no one's up there. But for whatever reason, they went up there and they did whatever they were doing.
Yeah, it's like human nature. We're always going to explore everywhere. It's like, no matter how harsh the environment is, people are getting that urge to go, right?
Oh, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I mean, everything that alternative archaeology, alternative anthropology, and history, and the slew of these sort of interrelated subject matters, they're all starting to show that
Exactly.
not only is the history of the Earth extremely long, extremely vast, and extremely deep, it's also been very thick. There's always been something going on. It seems like there's always been, peoples, races, species there, and they've always been doing something that we would consider intelligent. Constructive, intelligent, perhaps even sophisticated. Definitely, that's a fact. The sophistication level is a fact going back to the very end of the Ice Age. So we're talking 12, 13,000 years ago. I mean, archaeologically, we've established that, back to the end of the Ice Age, and probably, again, I assert into the Ice Age, we were doing, or whoever, we and maybe others, were doing some fairly extraordinary things. One of the most obvious and famous examples, going again way back to 12,500 and earlier, actually, is Göbekli Tepe in
Turkey,
what's now called Turkey, older Anatolia. That actually used to be the Armenian kingdom way back when.
Yeah, I've got an Armenian guest lined up to come on the show sometime, and can hardly wait to hear some of the mysteries from there, because that's like a
wonderful people.
Yeah,
wonderful people, wondrous people, wonderful people.
Yeah, just to give a quick catch-up on the chat here, we got some more comments from the viewers. One viewer was saying that her mom's last name actually means, or is the Cree word for Thunderbird.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. And
powerful
someone was
name.
mentioning... Sorry?
I was just saying that's a powerful name.
Yeah, no kidding. And the ancient sunken megaliths, someone made a comment about esoteric or...
He might be, whoever that was might have been talking about the megaliths that were found in one of the Great Lakes.
Oh,
they
yeah,
were tested.
Yeah.
They were tested, and they were concluded scientifically. There was no way in the realm of statistics and probability that these particular megaliths were there naturally. They were not glacial erratics. They did not just settle there. They pretty much have established, if that's what they're even talking about in their comment, that those megaliths that they were found is... somewhat crude as they are, they were definitely intelligently placed there. There was no way around it. So
yeah, no, there's some other neat stuff about the Great Lakes that I just noticed on the next slide. I've heard about it before, like the Great Lakes Triangle, similar to the Bermuda Triangle, where I guess planes went missing, and on the slide it just shows a triangle going around the Great Lakes and has different spots marked showing where different things happen. Like here, ships were found. Planes with people found. It's actually, and again, one of the little known facts about Canada and Ontario, it's actually considered more, I guess, rife, and that diagram doesn't really do it justice whatsoever. It's considered more rife than even the Bermuda Triangle for things that have gone on. Like, we're talking a huge number of bizarre disappearances, missing, accidents, disasters. Yeah.
And there's a few that are pretty historically relevant as well, like large historical events. One of the planes that went down, I believe it was in 1950. It was an American airliner. It went down mysteriously. I believe it was... I think I'm exactly right, actually, but I think there were 53 people on it, 52 or 53 people.
Wow.
It was, at the time, no, you know what? I think I am wrong. I think it was like 80-something.
Okay.
But at the time, it was the largest airline plane disaster in American history. It went down in what's called the Great Lakes Triangle, and apparently, as far as I understand, the wreckage was never found, and no one was ever found. Ever.
Yeah,
and that's just one of many, many, many stories. I guess we won't go too deeply into this. I'm going to say, though, that this is kind of a bit of a personal topic for me as well, because my uncle, who was also my godfather, he was a pilot.
Okay.
And he had his own private airplane, and I'll just say that part of my family became part of the Great Lakes Triangle mystery.
Oh, sorry to hear that, man. That's brutal.
Yeah, the event that took place has never been explained, never adequately explained. So I can honestly say that there is something bizarre that goes on there. One of the explanations for it is, which will actually tie in to one of the topics that we're going to get into when we start talking about Mont Chandran, and the megaliths there. Over the Great Lakes, there's something that I believe is called an Agona line.
Oh, really?
And it's a line. It's a magnetic line. It has to do with the Earth's magnetism. It has to do with true north and magnetic north. Oh. And what this line is basically it's sort of like almost like the median or the average in between the true north and the magnetic north on the compass. And this line is sort of falls in between, and it's where there's no deviation between true north and magnetic north. Okay. And that line, interestingly, goes right through the Great Lakes. Oh. Goes right through the Great Lakes, and a lot of people hypothesize that a lot of these disasters and very, very bizarre stories, very bizarre, a lot of, like, a huge amount of UFO reports and other such reports.
Yeah, someone just commented about UFOs in the chat there around the Great Lakes.
Oh, like, I can't even stress how many reports there are and many unreported reports. And I will chime in with that as part of the unreported reports. I can personally guarantee that there is a high density of very, let's just say, very unusual aerial phenomenon that goes on in and around the Great Lakes.
No kidding. Yeah, maybe one day I'll get a guest on the show and we'll do a whole topic just on the Great Lakes Triangle, because, man, I bet you we could talk for 2 or 3 hours about this one, right?
We could. I guess we should. Yeah, I guess we should move it along a little bit.
Okay.
But fascinating topic.
Yeah. No, the Great Lakes, I think it's one of the coolest places around to start researching ancient mysteries and of all kinds, really. Okay, so just north of one of the lakes, I guess I'll show it here, north of Lake Huron, I guess it's about an hour north of it, is Sudbury, or is it maybe a half hour?
To get right to the basin, it's probably from the lake. It's probably about 2, depending on your speed, 2 to 2.5 hours, let's say.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, so it's a little bit north of the Great Lakes. But
yes.
The Sudbury Basin slide that I put up here, it's showing basically the shape of the basin, and it's talking about Falcon Bridge Nickel Mines Limited. So I guess that's outlining that Sudbury is basically the #1 capital for getting nickel.
Sudbury. Okay, I'll kind of rewind just a little bit, just in case people are kind of wondering what's what the basin is all about. And the Sudbury Basin, one of the I guess more correct or descriptive names, the Sudbury Basin, is the Sudbury Impact Crater.
Yeah, I've heard it
also be called the Sudbury Igneous Complex. Basically, what the Sudbury Basin is that it's a massive impact crater.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge. The original size was actually the second largest impact crater in the world. The only one that's larger is in South Africa, Vredefort, South Africa.
So does this connect to the Ice Age then, or that would have been way before then, right?
This actually, the crater has been aged fairly conclusively at about just under 2 billion years old.
Wow, no kidding.
I think probably it's around 1.9, but that's within a range of possible variation there. So maybe 1.9, maybe 1.95. So it's just under 2 billion years old. So you're talking what's called the Proterozoic geological age, I believe. Paleo-Proterozoic geological age.
Yeah, I'm glad you tried to say that instead of me.
It wasn't easy, my friend. Yeah, so the basin was originally very circular. What you're seeing now is it was distended and warped, heavily distorted in shape over the years. It's actually what it separates two massive continental plate tectonics. It sort of straddles between the both of them, and so with those two pressures against each other and over vast geological age, it was crushed and distended and distorted into its current shape. But it was originally very, very circular. It was actually originally estimated to be about 250 kilometers across, which is massive. Again, the second biggest crater on the face of the Earth, bigger than the one down in Mexico for sure, and also the second deepest. Originally, it might have been the deepest, but right now, as it stands, because it was so crushed and distorted, it's the second deepest right now.
Okay.
And you were right about the mining too. Everything under the sun has been found in the Sudbury impact crater.
Yeah.
Everything under the sun, metals of all kinds, and semi-precious gems and minerals and precious minerals and crystals of all kinds. Like every kind of quartz crystal you can think of is there. Yeah. Every kind of high-grade granite you can think of is there. Basalt and, again, metals of every kind. Just everything under the sun.
So I guess the theory is that the meteor managed to contribute to a lot of these rare metals and stuff, right?
Well, the meteor theory is actually an old theory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The original theory was, and this kind of ties into something we'll talk about, was that it was a super volcano. It was a massive volcano. That was the first theory.
Oh,
the second theory was a meteor strike. Then quickly after that, they were like, okay, no. There's way too much going on here, and it's too massive, too much energy, because you're talking like liquefied and vaporized, atomized rock and metal that took place there originally. Then they were like, okay, no, this was definitely an asteroid, big asteroid. What they estimated was that it was whatever hit there was approximately the size of Mount Everest, and it was traveling at 1/8 the speed of light.
Holy cow!
The newest theory, though, which is definitely closer to the truth, is that a comet struck there. A massive comet the size of Mount Everest struck there at 1/8 the speed of light. And absolutely just, it changed world climate. It had a huge impact. I mean, there's remnants of that crater that have been found like clear across the Great Lakes in Minnesota and beyond.
Holy.
So it was massive what hit there. And I currently I'm leaning towards kind of a little known theory myself that the crater might have been formed by what's called electrical boring or electrical tooling or plasmic tooling, where the electrical universe theory would probably cover some of this in the Thunderbolts project, but it's possible that there was a massive discharge of plasma, basically like the biggest lightning you can ever imagine, and a constant steady stream of it, a huge plasmic discharge that electrically drilled and bored into this, and you can see that when they do experiments with electricity, they do form these craters.
Yeah, I've heard there was a video I watched called Thunderbolts of the God, and they go into pretty good detail about that. And there was even saying that that's one of the theories that created the craters, or not the craters, the big canyons on Mars as well, right? Yeah,
it seems to fall in line perfectly with what massive plasmic and electrical tooling and drilling does, and what you see on the landscape of Mars, and what you kind of appear to see in the Sudbury impact crater.
Yeah.
What that would have to do with, though, is that's something of catastrophic scale. Like, you don't normally get that force of electrical or plasmic boring, and what might have happened was that, and this is part of the theory of when planets or very large bodies approach each other,
Yeah.
there's a massive plasmic discharge, an arcing plasmic discharge between them.
Okay.
And so at the time, if this was formed by a plasmic drilling or boring, then there may have been something, 2 billion years ago, like a planet or something else massive that was coming close to the planet, and there was an electrical exchange going on between the two, which created this incredible impact crater.
Geez, it almost kind of reminds me of the Nibiru theory people talk about, how apparently there's a planet that used to come close to the Earth.
Who can say?
Yeah.
We're talking 2 billion years ago. This is beyond ages. We're talking eons ago.
Wow.
So, but it does seem to bear the characteristics and the hallmark of something like that taking place.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, I guess I was just wanted to get on to the next one here. We got a really wild picture of looks like mountains and lakes, and it's really pristine. And I guess this is on the shore of the Great Lakes, also south of Sudbury.
I'm not seeing the picture.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just got to switch the scene over. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about, but I just want to make sure visually.
Yeah, there we go. I put it up on the screen now. I got it's basically a mountain range, and it's got some lakes in between it, and it does.
Okay, and the rock is white.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, yeah. For some reason, I can't see the picture on my feed. Oh, there we go. It just flipped over. Okay.
Now, usually there's about a couple seconds delay in between what you'll see and when I flip.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
yes.
So this looks amazing.
This is one of my favorite places. When I go into the mountains, when I'm in the province of Ontario, I go into these mountains. These mountains are just absolutely amazing. They've been known since basically time immemorial as a extremely sacred and spiritual landscape, topography place. These are what are called the Cloche Mountains.
Cloche. Okay.
The Cloche, if you translate that into English, it means the bell. Like the kind of bell that you ring. And the reason they call this, what you're seeing in the photograph is these white rocks, and again, these beautiful white rocks go as far as the eye can see, on and on and on. It's quite a massive range. It's a big range. Very long range that goes from Killarney and beyond all the way past the way you would take to go down to Manitoulin Island and beyond there. So it's a massive range.
Yeah, I've drove through there, but I never realized how big it was, like on the scale of this picture.
I love going and just becoming lost in the Cloche experience. It's absolutely mystical after a while. It's some of the weather phenomenon and the atmospheric phenomenon that will form there is just blow your mind.
Now, I've heard a little bit about the creation of the mountains near Manitoulin Island. I guess it's part of the legend that said that the creator put mountains on the north part to block the harsh winds from the north, so that he could make the Manitoulin Island a more hospitable place.
Yeah, that would be the Cloche Mountains.
Yeah.
What you're seeing in the photo, the white rock is actually quartzite and quartz.
Oh.
So all of what you're seeing there for miles and miles and miles and miles beyond your sight to the horizon is quartz and quartzite. Mostly quartzite, but also quartz.
And that's associated with gold too, isn't it? Or?
It is. It's associated with many things. It's associated with silver, with gold, with all sorts of geodes and on and on.
Yeah, thank God miners haven't destroyed this place yet.
Well, there are, unfortunately, there are a few quarries in there. One of which kind of ruins one of the most amazing views. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah. So it's quartzite, and the reason they call it the Bell Isles or the Bell Mountains is because there's several examples of this, but I've come across it personally. Is that many of the rocks, or we'll just say a certain number of the rocks that you come across there, are they have a very high crystalline and metallic content to them. Okay. And some of them are hollowed out. And so when you take something and you strike the rock, it rings and resonates like a bell.
So
it will
there's
actually
the
like
bell name comes from, yeah.
like you'll hear it resonating, you'll hear the vibration, and what the indigenous peoples way back when, what they used to do is they used to use these rocks at the tops and the peaks of the mountains, and they would use them as sounding signals, sounding bells across the distance.
Jeez.
To signal gatherings of certain kinds, whatever it might be, whatever they decided that they were to, what their signals were. I guess they probably had a kind of a codified signal language that they used.
Yeah.
And so that's the Bell Mountains. One thing I'll say quickly about them, kind of piggybacking off what you were saying about the creator of the Great Spirit,
yeah,
rearing up these mountains to give Manitoulin and the Great Lakes the beautiful atmosphere that it has. These mountains were originally, and again, you've got to remember, these things were absolutely crushed and destroyed by the Ice Age.
Yeah.
Under countless tons of ice. They were originally bigger than the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah,
they were comparable. They were comparable to the Himalayan mountains.
Holy.
Okay, so that's what you're seeing are basically the feet of the mountains that are left over after them being absolutely destroyed and decimated, crushed, ground down by the Ice Age and that massive wall of ice that I was talking about.
Yeah. No, I always wondered that too, because like a lot of the mountains we have in Ontario seem like they've been ground down like that. Like Mount Kemminus has those features too, right?
Yeah, well, they were all under this colossal wall of ice, and besides the land just being crushed,
yeah,
underneath it, under countless tons, the ice was always developing, it was always forming, it was always moving, it was always reacting, and so what you would get, like mountains like this, they would have been toppled down. The ice would have encased them, then you would have had flexation that was going on, flexing and movement that was going on, and it would have just literally crushed, cracked, and sheared and just broke and collapsed these things encased within the ice and then started moving them around internally, crushing them more.
Sort of like we see in the wintertime here in Canada, how ice gets into the roads and destroys them and leaves giant potholes in the spring, right? Just that type of effect on a much larger scale.
The ice will destroy everything. The ice will destroy metal. The ice will destroy rock. It doesn't matter. It's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
It's the only liquid that expands when it's cooled, which water itself has bizarre qualities to it, some of which aren't actually explainable. But that's one of them, is that it expands when it's frozen, and it absolutely destroys whatever is in its way.
Yeah, no kidding. Is it alright to go into the next slide that we got here, Lake Nipissing, and that's the one next to North Bay, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so yeah, if you're in Sudbury and you want to get to North Bay, you're basically just going to take a highway, east, and then you'll be at North Bay. And
yes.
It looks like on the image here, there's a red circle outlining the side of the lake, and is that a meteor crater that it's outlining, or?
What that is, and the reason I chose this is because it really, and I think we're probably going to see more of this kind of aligning now, is that it does relate to the other topics that we're getting to.
Okay.
What you're seeing, Nipissing is a huge lake as well, by the way. It's a massive lake. If you ever fly over it in an airplane, you'll see that it's a very, very large lake, but it's a very weird lake too. And again, because I want to paint this picture, a lot of people don't realize the strangeness to this lake. A lot of people don't even realize the basic nature of the lake. Okay. That lake is, on average, it's very, very shallow, for one thing.
Oh.
Extremely shallow. I think the average depth is something like 15 or 20 feet, just averaged out. Averaged out. There's deeper parts to it, but the average of all the numbers put together is about 15 or 20 feet. Not that it's all like that.
Yeah.
But the reason it's like that is because what you're seeing is actually volcanic in origin. That entire lake is volcanic in origin. The circle that your image is on right now, that's actually, I used to live precisely where that circle is. It's called Calendar Bay.
Oh, cool.
And what that circle is, and another part of the other slide where there's another circle sort of closer into the lake, more into the lake than Calendar Bay.
Oh, they're both on those islands in the center of the lake, right?
Yes. They're both massive, massive remnants of volcanic chutes. Huge. Oh. And here's the thing, is that both Calendar Bay, which is, again, the circular remnant of a massive volcanic chute, and these isles that you're looking at, they're called the Manitou Isles.
Okay.
They were both formed, we're talking a supersonic eruption that took place, faster than the speed of sound.
Wow. When
these things erupted and came out the way they did. So this entire lake, and this is where we're kind of going into with this prehistoric landscape of Ontario, in northern Ontario, this was formed by mega volcanic processes. So you're talking about a landscape of a lot of volcanism, both underground and overground.
Okay.
So this was a land of volcanism. With volcanism always comes a high degree of minerals, metallic minerals, metals, crystals, just all sorts of things. A cocktail of things come with volcanism. It's igneous creation. Okay. So this lake, most people don't even know that this lake is actually volcanic, that this was the land of volcanic activity. Now, I'm going to kind of quickly sort of shoot into something that we're going to get into later.
Sure.
To the indigenous and the ancient shaman, let's say.
Yep.
We'll stay with the term shaman. There's other terms that they were known as and that they could be known as, but we'll stay with this term shaman.
Yeah.
To the ancient indigenous shaman, that was very significant. The geological makeup and composition of a land that was formed through such power and containing so many crystalline metallic mineral injections and content was very, very useful to them, especially in the metaphysical landscape. So this was a land of a lot of power. And the shamans, the true shamans, the archaic and the ancient shamans, they would have known this. And in traveling the metaphysical landscape, the shamanic landscape, the spiritual landscape, I'm sure that they were treated to all sorts of wonders and spectacles and some very potent, powerful places because of the fact that this was entirely volcanically created. And put on top of that, the glacial age and what was here as well, and the tremendous forces that the glacial age brought with them, the shamans would have been aware of this. They would have known these features of the landscape.
Yeah.
And just to kind of prove that point, another fact that a lot of people don't know about Lake Nipissing is that the old name for it is a very bizarre name, and it's a name that kind of speaks volumes, especially with what we were just talking about. Sure. Originally, the translation of the name was, they called it Witch's Lake.
Ah.
That was the old original name of this lake, either Witches or Sorcerer's Lake.
No kidding. Yeah, that reminds me of Mount Kemenus because it's in the shape of a witch's cauldron too, right?
Yeah, that Mount Sheminus, that would have been more the sort of the pioneers and the later people giving it that name, just kind of almost a name of curiosity more than anything. The original name of Witch's Lake, Witches or Sorcerer's Lake for Nipissing, bespeaks the fact that in the ancient times, the older times and the ancient times, before the indigenous people were dealing with colonialists and settlers and that kind of thing, things were going on at this lake that had everything to do with the name that it was given. This was a lake of magic. This was a lake of power. This was a lake of, I would imagine, some very powerful indigenous sorcerers and shamans. The reason I'm using the term sorcerer as well is that is one of the things that the original settlers and the original explorers called the shamans. They actually called them sorcerers because there was really no difference, and that's not a negative connotation whatsoever. There was really no difference between what these, medicine men, what these shamans were doing, and what a genuine sorcerer did. And again, that's in no negative connotation. When I use the term sorcerer, no negative connotation to that term.
No, it reminds
whatsoever.
me of the term magi too. That's basically what it implies.
Yes, these were people that had this knowledge and were able to intelligently use it. Were able to travel into the invisible realm, the invisible dimensions of reality, through this landscape, this magnificent landscape, for the benefit of themselves and for the benefit of their people. So this lake was known in old times as a place where there was either a powerful lineage of female shamans, witches, because it's a feminine form of the name.
Oh.
So there may have been someone very powerful that resided at this lake that was known far and wide, or sort of a lineage or a line of them that resided there, that lake became known for them.
Jeez.
So that's pretty significant.
No, I've drove through there so many times, but I've never heard any of the history like that. It's like, man, I want to try camping at this lake now.
The mighty Nipissing. There's some bizarre stories about the Manitou Isles. Don't try camping on the Manitou Isles.
Oh, really?
There's a story of a native man that he was out on the lake fishing, and a wicked storm came in. Oh. He retreated to the lake to take cover and to try to, not die in the storm. And while he was there, I guess all sorts of bizarre supernatural occurrences began happening. He was hearing voices. He could tell that there were presences there. And I don't remember the full tale, but what ended up happening was that I guess he had a tent that he kind of quickly set up. Yeah. And he took off his boots. His boots were drenched. He took off his boots, and I guess he just left them outside. And the wet boots outside of his tent caught fire.
How's that even possible?
Exactly. They caught fire. He was so freaked out that he actually left all of his stuff there, jumped back into his water vessel, and he braved this crazy storm and possible death by drowning, because crazy storms happen there, rather than stay on the island where it was safe, where his boots burst into flame.
Holy
so
cow.
We're talking, obvious supernatural activity going on there. Perhaps some dark stuff, because you got to think of it too. The guy was camping on the remnants of an ancient volcanic tube that goes deep, kilometers deep into the earth itself. Yeah. So, who knows, maybe something came up and out of there.
Jeez. Yeah, even one of the viewers pointed out here that it explains a few things to them. That the early colonists were told to avoid that area lest they be cursed by the shamans. So
there we go.
Curses in the area too.
Well, you know what? Again, I don't think that a lake, especially like we were talking about ancient trade routes and water routes prehistorically as well. Lake Nipissing was a major trade route. Yeah. Throughout the centuries and for thousands of years, it's very easy to get from the St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes up to Nipissing. Okay. Extremely easy, and especially back then, at certain times the water levels were higher. They were also lower, extremely lower at a certain point in the ancient past as well. But there was a time when there was even more access to the water routes. So Nipissing was a major trading center. So this was an important location, and for a large lake like that, that's such an important location, to be given the name of, Lake of the Witch, Lake of the Sorcerer.
Yeah.
That says something very significant.
Jeez, someone almost needs to do a video about Lake Nipissing or something, because, man, I'd watch it for sure.
This just scratches the surface, but I guess we should roll along the conversation.
Yeah. It seems like every topic we're here talking about could be its own show. All right,
it's the way I like it.
Oh yeah, I'll just switch over the slide here. Okay, the next one that I got on the screen is looks like an infrared image showing a Sudbury basin next to the Temagami anomaly.
Okay, right. Okay, so we're gonna jump up and over to Temagami. Temagami is farther north than Nipissing and the Sudbury Impact Crater. It's farther north and a little more to the east. Temagami is also, I have actually quite a bit of former experience in the area with my ex.
Oh, okay.
And I know I wouldn't say I know the area as well as the locals and the First Nations people there, but I have some experience there. In one thing, a relative of my ex lived on what's considered the most powerful part of that area. It's an island, and that area is also known as by the First Nations and by pretty much anyone that goes there as being a very powerful place as well.
Nice.
There's powerful supernatural and forces of magic there as well.
Yeah, like when you're driving up to the sites up north that I like, the Stonehenge and the Mount Keminis, it's basically Temagami is one of the destinations that pretty close to on the way there. And it's got a huge fire tower too. So if anyone wants to go and do the fire tower tour, you only have to donate a couple bucks, then you can climb to the top and really get a amazing perspective of what that place looks like.
It's well worth it if the person has the stomach for it, because it's besides the fire tower itself and the height, it's also on a very raised and elevated point of land.
Yeah.
So when you're up there, you're up there. You're elevated.
Yeah,
so,
and when it's really windy, the whole tower sways a little bit. It's like, oh boy.
Yes. Yeah, not for the faint of heart. I'll throw that out there right now.
Yeah.
But yes, the Temagami anomaly. So we're talking about a place that to the Ojibwe people and the other people, First Nations people that are part of Temagami, a powerful place in terms of medicine, a powerful place in terms of spirit, energy, the supernatural and magic. There's also scientifically and geologically a very bizarre point to it, and it's called the Temagami anomaly.
Yeah.
And what that is that it's a magnetic anomaly. The full name is the Temagami magnetic anomaly.
Okay.
It's basically pretty much what the name says. Around that area that you're seeing, where it's identified as the Temagami anomaly, gravitationally, it's anomalous. There's a distortion of gravitation and magnetics there. It's something that's buried deep underground in the geology. They don't understand what's going on there, but it has radically altered the magnetism, the magnetic field, and the gravitational field around that area. What's interesting about it is that if you look over, you'll see the Sudbury Basin.
Yeah.
The Sudbury Impact Crater also has gravitational and magnetic anomalies to it, and they're both kind of very, very similar in a lot of ways, where it's almost like they're mirroring each other, which is very, very strange. And if you look very carefully, there's sort of a dividing point in between the basin and the Temagami magnetic anomaly. What that point is in between is a lake, a massive lake called Lake Wanapitei. Lake Wanapitei is yet another massive crater. huge impact crater. This one is definitely by an asteroid, though.
Oh.
What's unusual about it is that it's actually sits right on the outer rim of the Sudbury impact crater. So you've got a huge 250 kilometer impact crater in what's Sudbury, and on its rim you get a massive asteroid hit, creating this massive crater lake of Lake Wanapitei. The chances of that occurring are literally astronomical.
No,
There's nowhere else in the world that's taken place. Now it seems to separate, when you look at it, seems to divide the Temagami magnetic anomaly from the Sudbury impact crater. It almost seems like these two are like a geological anatomy, like these two are actually joined, but their structure was massively disrupted by that asteroid that struck directly in between them. I think it's something like about 40 million years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, you've got magnetic and gravitational anomalies.
Jeez,
which,
yeah.
Again,
I always thought the one in Sudbury would be bigger, but it seems like the Temagami one's actually bigger, huh?
Well, the one in Sudbury is more interrupted because there's been more damage to it, because it's actually the crater itself, and there's been more damage to it. There's been huge forces kind of breaking it apart and crumbling it and stretching it and crushing it. So that's probably why. And then again, you get the Wanapitei asteroid striking the outer rim as well, dealing a hugely devastating blow to the crater. So that's probably why. Otherwise, I have a feeling they would pretty much practically mirror each other perfectly.
Oh, if it wasn't for that, yeah.
Which is strange. It's unexplained. They've yet to explain it. They've yet to understand what is causing it, what is under the ground that's causing it.
Jeez. No, I've drove through there a couple times, and one day we went through, there was actually a small earthquake, I guess around 3 point or something on the scale. So there must be a fault line there as well, right?
Well, what I mentioned earlier, it's actually the in-between point between two massive continental plate tectonics.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The one to the south is younger, it's more active, and the one to the north, and it's got its own parts and pieces to it, but the one to the north is less active and older.
Yeah.
So there's it's like a fractured mirror of fault lines running through the crater and extending outward, and especially also with Lake Wanapitei creating its own faults, cracks, kind of radiating out from it as well.
Wow, that's really neat. Yeah, I'm glad you shared this with me, because I've heard about the Sudbury stuff before, but I never knew that Temagami was also connected to this. That's pretty wild.
It is, and it's unexplained. It's a bizarre geological anomaly.
Yeah. I was just going to jump to the next slide here. We got looks like a petroglyph of a man standing with his arms outstretched.
Yes. That's one of the petroglyphs that's found in Temagami.
Okay.
I forget the aging for it, but it's, as you can tell by the image, it's heavily eroded.
Oh yeah.
It's very, very old. It's certainly ancient. I would imagine it's probably thousands of years old, or maybe younger, but it looks quite archaic and quite old.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing there, I know some people have said, "Oh, it's a turtle." Personally, I don't see a turtle. I see what's known popularly, I guess, in archaeological and anthropological circles, and as the Birdman.
Yeah, well, I recognize it as the Orion stance, because the Longman in England, the shamans there, or druids, they put one that almost looks identical. You can just jump onto that slide. Yeah, there
it's quite possible.
Yeah, see, there's the Longman of England, and it's basically.
Okay, I'm just waiting for the image to come up on my end.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just describe it. It almost looks the same as that petroglyph, and it's a guy standing on the side of a hill with his arms outstretched. And I think he had his male member there before, but they removed it.
How politically correct of
Yeah.
them.
And then I always wonder too, because there's different occultists that believe that arms outstretched is part of the Orion, like symbology. So I just got another slide that shows how there's a guy from like the ancient times holding his arms outstretched, and his belt happens to be the stars of Orion, and then that would
Orion's
eventually
belt.
point to Sirius. And it's a theme that you find all over, like even in Egypt. I got another one here of King Tut. He's sitting with his arms outstretched in the same way, and his leg even bends like the guy from the Orion constellation. So I don't know, I guess that's probably my guess, because I think shamans all around the world, when they communicate with the other side, they usually tend to get the same information, but with their own spin from like their cultural background. So
It's possible. It's quite possible.
yeah, it could be a turtle, I guess, too, but that's probably my guess. Right?
What I see personally is, I mean, what you're saying is possible.
Yeah.
Besides that, I would have to kind of think about it a little more and study it a little more. But
Yeah, I could do a whole show on that.
I'm seeing the icon that's known as the Birdman, and what the Birdman is, it's a sign, it's a symbol of shamanism.
Like the Anunnaki Birdman, you mean, or
No, the shamanic Birdman. It's a
Birdman.
popular iconic symbol of it's a man and yet a bird. It's like a hybrid of a man and a bird.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
really
that's
cool.
that's the shamanic flight. That's the flight of the soul, or the astral projection
No
of
kidding.
the shaman. And to me, that's initially what I'm seeing here is the sort of there's a specific term for it. I think it's called a therianthrope, where
Okay.
it's a hybridization of an animal and a human form.
Oh, yeah.
And what it's
yeah.
also showing is showing the metamorphosis of consciousness of the shaman as well, and the ability of the shaman, or we'll use the term sorcerer, to alter reality and to fly and journey into the other reality. This is a very famous sort of iconic glyph and figure that has been attributed to shamans, the shamanic flight, for many, many thousands of years. So that's what I'm seeing here, and what this says to me is that, based on the massive erosion and age that seems to be apparent with this symbol,
Yeah.
is that within the Temagami area, that this was being practiced, and this was a part of their society and their culture going back thousands of years.
Jeez. So if I was going in the area, would it be easy to find this petroglyph? Is like a park around it, or
No, there's no park or anything like that.
so you have to know where it is, right?
Well, yeah, we'd have to have a discussion about that. There's it's not the only one, but it's the one I decided to highlight just purely because of the fact that it does indicate some very ancient, very heavy shamanic
Okay.
presence there.
Yeah, I guess
in
it's
my
not-
eyes, that's what I'm seeing. In my eyes, it's completely obvious. But
Yeah, I'll talk to you
on
about
your
it.
point, though,
Yeah, I'll
on your
talk to
point though about concerning
Sure.
Orion, the part of the constellation of Orion, not the entire thing, but a part of it was used by ancient Native American and shamanic traditions, which was a very significant part of the Native American shamanic tradition, and they did use.
No kidding.
Basically, it was seen as something different than Orion, but they did use a major component of the constellation structure
Yeah.
in their life and afterlife rituals, rites, and ceremonies. We won't go into it right now, but just kind of on your point that constellation component was a very, very ancient part of some pretty heavy stuff that was going on in prehistoric and ancient times in North America. So we'll leave it at that for the moment.
All right, cool. Yeah, and then I got some viewers that are really into megaliths and stuff, and looks like the next slide I got here is one from Timmins, I believe, and it's like a giant megalith. And this, from the scale of it, it looks really huge, like rocks piled up on top of each other in the shape of something.
Yeah, we'll just talk about that really briefly. I just kind of threw that in just because we're kind of making our way up northern Ontario to, I know your favorite site, the Mont Chandran.
Yeah,
so I thought I would throw those in. Basically, what this is, it was kind of discovered, I would say probably rediscovered by an elderly gentleman several years ago.
Cool.
And they're identifying it as a natural formation, but when you're there, it seems really old, and it seems like a pretty unusual natural formation because it's basically an 8-story tall pile of massive rocks. 8 stories.
Holy cow! So that's like one of the biggest megaliths around.
they're sort of trepidously placed on top of each other. Like there's caves and there's apertures and cracks in between that you can go in. But you can make your way all the way to the top, and basically when you're at the very top, it's 8 stories, and they're basically, it's like a piled sort of pylon of these things, and so it for it to be natural and just happen to
how do you
look like that, it seems a little bit far-fetched, especially with the amount of destruction
I was just
that went on in the glacial age.
How could the ice go over that without crushing it?
It seems a little bit questionable. So I just wanted to throw that in just to show that Timmins is definitely north of Temagami, and it's quite close to Mount Chandran and Shamanic.
Yeah, about a 2-hour drive or so, I guess. Right?
Yeah, like relatively speaking, it's within the larger region. So I thought I would throw that in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've never heard of that one, and so I'm sure my viewers will really appreciate something new to see too. I haven't heard of any megaliths.
The city has actually recognized it. Yeah. They've recognized it because I guess it's kind of hard to avoid, and they gave it some really kind of lame name. But anyway.
No, I noticed that the next picture, is this the same megalith or?
It's the same megalith, yes.
Different view. Okay.
Yeah. Nice. And those pictures really show barely any of it, just to give an idea of its sort of pile-on sort of structure look to it.
Yeah, that's the tough part about doing research in Canada. It's like a lot of these places you go to are going to be so overgrown with trees. It's hard to take good photographs to give it a perspective without trees blocking everything. Right?
Exactly. In the Canadian boreal wilderness, things grow and die really quickly. There's a lot of really quick natural recycling that goes on.
Fires
because of the extremes of weathers. Yeah, so you're going to get a lot of rapid growth, and a lot of the trees that grow here grow really quickly, so you're going to have that problem.
Nice. Well, I guess not that great, but yeah. No, I was just saying nice, too, that we're on to the forest rings. It's like, this was a really wild topic that I just learned about from you, and I'm so shocked that they exist because I go over all of Ontario or all of Canada all the time, like above, trying to look like satellite images, and I've never seen these before. But it's amazing that plane photography seems to be able to pick them up, right?
Yeah, well, that's actually the only place where they can be picked up, where they can be seen. You won't notice and one thing is, I'm glad I brought them to your attention because it does show some of the bizarreness of the geology of the area, of your area of interest in Mount Shamanic.
The blog that I was reading about these, they said they're all over Canada, but they're most concentrated right next to that Stonehenge site that I research all the time.
Oh, by far. They're by far concentrated in northern Ontario, and there's definitely a concentration around the area. The only way you can see them is from above. Yeah, they called that area the Lord of the Rings, I guess, for Canada. a little dubbing. Yeah, the image I put on, it's kind of hard to make it out. It's like old plane photography, but you can see these giant rings occur, I guess, naturally in the forest. And it looks sort of like a perfect circle in some images, but then I noticed in other ones, they're sort of like hexagonal shape too, right? Yes, there's definitely some geometry going on there. They're basically, to kind of sum up in a nutshell for your listeners, these rings, these forest rings, are unexplained right now. There's no kind of overlapping explanation. They've studied them a fair amount. There's much more study to do, but they do display very unusual qualities that they can't fully account for.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
a lot of people will say, well, they're impact craters
Yeah.
and they're fungus rings,
Fairy
which
rings, yeah.
they do resemble those as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
They're this, they're that, they're all sorts of things. Everyone has their theory, and it could be that everyone's partially right or completely wrong. The thing with these rings is that they alter the not just the vegetation around them. They actually influence and alter the growth of trees and vegetation around them.
Yeah.
They alter the soil massively. They chemically alter the soil massively. They also alter the actual rock and the geology themselves.
Wow.
They generate a fairly strong electrical field around them.
Yeah.
And so they're literally altering everything: the rock, the metals, the soils, the vegetation, and obviously with that the wildlife and how the wildlife react to them.
Yeah.
They're altering everything. So what they are exactly is unknown. What's going on underground is just not explained at this point, but they are bizarre and they're unusual, and there's a huge concentration in them. And again, we're talking about lands that were very volcanic in nature way back.
Yeah. No, I was researching them online and like digging to see if I could find out the scientific explanation for these forest rings. And they were listing that methane gas was pretty prevalent in them. And people were trying to say that was the only thing responsible, but then in the bottom it mentioned the magnetic anomalies, and they're like, well, the gas can't really explain those. So
no, there's no adequate explanation right now.
Yeah.
They display so many strange qualities. Again, and they know that these things are actually altering the rock itself. It's actually altering the rock itself. It's altering the soil. And I believe one of the tests that they did actually showed that they behave in such a way that they seem to defy gravity. The water table that's underneath and around them is actually held up by the electrical and the gravitational anomaly. It's held up where it shouldn't be held. And it absolutely baffles them. And I know some of the scientists they're really eager to get their hands into this because it's absolutely baffling. It's actually, I guess, in a common way of saying it, is that these things are somehow levitating the water tables.
Jeez, huh? No kidding. Yeah, that's incredible. I've never heard of anything even remotely similar to that, huh?
Well, no one has. That's why there's no explanation.
Yeah, it was
So another
wild,
strange feature to the Northern Ontario landscape.
Yeah, it was so wild too. Like when you showed me this image, I happened to notice that the lake in the top of the image here is the end of Larder Lake, and then that's the one that the Stonehenge is on. And I recognized it because the house that I bought up north is actually right about there.
Yeah, you had pointed that out. That's absolutely, that's quite a synchronicity.
So I guess one of these trips I go up, I'm going to have to, I don't know if there's roads that go to any of these forest rings or if I'm going to have to trek in the woods to find them, but
probably for most of them you're going to have to trek. I know that a number of them, they have the exact GPS coordinates for them.
Oh, sick.
So you'd be able to program that into your GPS or whatever you're using.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start using GPS.
Get right to them.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to zoom in on one of the forest rings, because someone who is really into the electric universe mentioned that the shape that the forest rings are taking matches like the electric discharge shapes too. More of like So that's
there's geometry going on. It's they're circular because force normally moves outward unimpeded in a circular pattern. But once you look into it, there are definitely you can tell that these circles are being formed by there's an interlacing geometry that's sort of unseen behind them. The force behind them is definitely geometric.
Yeah.
That, to me, that would probably relate to the fact that there are electrical and magnetic fields around it. So as soon as you get those components and those energies going, you're going to get geometrical structures that begin. That's how crystals form and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Crystalline geometrical structures. So, yeah, good eye. Whoever pointed that out, good eye. And I do believe personally that it has something to do with an electrical catastrophic aspect to the landscape.
Yeah. No, there was a really cool comment from one of the viewers here commenting saying, yeah, the circles in Africa that Michael Tellinger researches are kind of similar, except it almost seems like people put rocks on top of the rings to like make them stand out even more.
I could see that happening.
Yeah.
With ours, unfortunately, there's really thick, dense boreal forest.
Yeah. And the ice so move through it too. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, unless you know that they're there, and again, I'm sort of going to I'm going to put my neck out a little bit, and I'm going to say that I would imagine, based on the lore of the area, that the shamans were aware of these.
Oh yeah.
Of these structures.
And that was one of the reasons that I read that the Stonehenge was put in the spot that it was, is because the First Nation legend talked about power spots and that those Stonehenge rocks were able to harness the energy from those and that they were going to use it for protection, I believe. So,
are you aware of what kind of rocks there, what the general composition of the rocks are?
No, I've actually only been to the Stonehenge site twice. My first trip was back in August, and I did another one in October. But we got another trip coming up this spring. So in the spring, we're going to go up with some more testing equipment, like the electromagnetic field testers, and I think I'm going to bring my metal detector. But yeah, we're going to have to try to find out what the composition of the rock is too. It might
that would be really good to know.
Yeah, it's probably in one of the studies that was done by the university or professor. So I'll reread his blogs again, see if I can find that out for you. No, and then I just put up a map here on the screen showing the whole area where this Stonehenge is. There's a highway that goes up north, and that's the one that keeps going to Timmins, where we showed that giant megalith. We got the Arctic watershed mark up here, and that's where the continent is basically the high point, so any water from there is either going to flow north or south, depending on what side of the watershed it's on. Yeah, and then what else did we have up there? I can show the viewers, basically, here's the Stonehenge location. And then here's the end where those circles we were looking at. You can see there's where it was there. And on the far end is Mount Kemminus. So I guess we're getting pretty close to that part of the presentation too. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, when we were talking off the air, you mentioned this crack or split that goes up the center of Mount Kemminus. And you have some information about that?
Well, I know one of the comparisons you had made was comparing the I guess pillars. when you look down at the mountain looks divided. Yeah. It looks divided into two sides. You had compared it to the excuse me.
Yeah, the
Masonic, the pillars, the Masonic pillars and the pillars of Solomon's Temple.
Yeah.
And you had identified what side or what pillar, in your theory, the what you're calling the offering table was located on.
Yeah, it's located right on the like basically the clearing on the top of that part. If anyone hasn't seen it before.
Yeah, could you point at that right now?
Sure. It's right there is where the offering table is. I'm just zooming in a little bit. There we go. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, right. That's where I thought. So yeah, you had compared them to the Masonic pillars, and the Masonic pillars are kind of an interesting topic.
Yeah.
The Masonic pillars, basically what they represent, is they represent the diametric and oppositional forces of creation in the universe.
Okay.
Kind of the contraries that we could come up with a million examples of positive and negative, light and dark, above and below, all of the opposites that we know exist in our reality. Yeah. In our world and creation, the massive opposites, and such things such as electricity to flow. There's a negative and a positive charge that are used.
Exactly.
There's male and female. There's opposites of elements. The water as opposed to air, and that's basically what the pillars represent. They represent the the opposites that are in creation.
Yeah.
And the one pillar where you're identifying your offering table being on is the left-hand pillar. Okay.
Yeah.
And I find this kind of interesting, and it's, who knows if it's right, but it's interesting to kind of piggyback off your theory, because the left-hand pillar is also called the pillar of Bina.
Oh.
And what that means is kind of difficult to explain, but it means the pillar of severity, or the pillar of contraction, where the one pillar is sort of expansion, the opposite pillar is expansion, and sort of ever expanding, let's say.
Sure.
Okay, light, ever expanding, and the other pillar, the one that we're talking about, is the pillar of contraction, where forces in the universe are contracted. You get the creation of molecules and atoms and cells, and things stick together, right, in our reality. So the pillar of severity, kind of to relate it to what you're saying, what I find interesting is that the pillar of severity, the pillar of Bina, or the left-hand pillar, is often attributed to sacrifice.
Ah.
Because on the one hand side, you have the side of life and light and give and offer and freedom and expansion, and on the other side, there's that part of life which takes, which things die, which things are killed, which things there is darkness, there is contraction, there is the hard side of nature, as opposed to the merciful and the blessed side of nature, the light side as opposed to the dark side, positive and negative charge.
Yeah.
So that left-hand pillar, it's often attributed, the pillar of severity is attributed to the act and the rites of sacrifice.
Jeez.
So I found that kind of an interesting correlation.
Yeah, if that's a coincidence, that's a pretty good one. Jeez. No, I was just going to show you one of the slides I was working on too that has to do with this. Is I was going over the different sacred tree symbols found all over the world, basically Africa, America, India, Asia, Europe, and I noticed like the India version, when they put theirs together, they had some elements of the pillar being divided in half. So I'll just zoom in so people can see that the pillar on the Indian version basically has a guy doing a sacrifice next to divided pillars. So that's why when I was going to Mount Keminus, I'm like, I bet you any money I'm going to find an offering table up there. And when I checked around, just so happened on the left side of there, that's where the offering table was.
Very interesting. Very interesting. With the Masonic pillars, which are also the Kabbalistic pillars, there's two pillars, but then the combination or the union of these two pillars forms a third central pillar in the middle.
Okay.
The third central pillar in the middle is like I said, the union of them, and it's considered the axis, like the axis mundi, the center of the world, the center of the circle.
Jeez.
What else could I call it? The kind of the spine, the trunk of the tree.
Yeah.
The axis of the tree.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, and it's neat too that the two serpents that descend down on this tree are also called the two opposites. Like one serpent is supposed to be the knowledge of creation, and the other one's the serpent of destruction. So it's interesting that that two thing comparison comes up again, really.
Well, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of life and death, the tree of knowledge of light and darkness, the tree of knowledge of above and below, right and left.
Yeah. No, and then the next slide that I put up too shows basically when I was testing filling up the offering table, and I was doing some shamanic research there as well, just to give people an idea of what it looks like at the top and the shape of it. And then the bag that I used to fill the offering table kind of reminded me of that ancient Magi bag that was really popular around the world too. Some people said that it was like holy water that they put into it. So that could be something. And I'll just zoom in too. It's like you can see the image. There's like a shadow behind me that's being cast by Mount Cauldron, and then that shadow is really defined. So I think that there's some sort of like a shadow symmetry that happens at this place, but I'm still trying to decipher exactly what type of alignment it is.
Mm-hmm. You'd have to get into exactments there to establish something for sure.
And then here's just an image too I brought up when I went to the museum here in Toronto. They got offering tables there that you can compare to the one up north. So if you're ever doing the trip, or any of the viewers, if they want to see an offering table that is legitimately an offering table in the museum and to compare it, you can do it both in the same day.
Fantastic.
They got some from Egypt. They got some from Rome. Now, some people are going to say that the shape isn't very similar, but my theory is that this offering table wasn't a lot of detail put into it, just because of how harsh the environment is there. Like, I think most people would probably want to start migrating away from there to somewhere further south. But I guess there was a lot of First Nations people that did remain there too, right?
Oh, the indigenous people have been there for at least 6,000 years.
Yeah, and then they were saying
that's been established.
Yeah, and then when the explorers first came, like the European ones, I guess the lake that the Draco Stonehenge on had like over 60 people canoeing in it, so it was a really thriving spot, right?
Yeah, and I think we were talking about before that that lake has always been known for just being thick with fish and the wildlife that come from the fish, and marine organisms and creatures and food. Basically food and wildlife. It's always been known as being very, very thick with wildlife, both in the water and out the water. Nice. And I would say that if they were performing, well, we know actually, again, it's established that they were performing rituals around the mountain and upon the mountaintop, that any sacrifices or materials and substances needed by the shaman and the medicine men, that lake, Larder Lake, would have been a prime spot to get what they needed.
And it's neat too. Larder Lake connects to Ottawa River, and then the Ottawa River to the St. Lawrence, and then the St. Lawrence to the ocean. So you basically had a highway going to the old world if you needed it.
And way back when, there's one thing I'm going to mention to you as well.
Sure.
Way back when, just after the ice age, after the ice started receding, there was actually up around that area, there was a massive, what they call, the technical term for it is a glacial lake. Okay. A massive glacial lake that was up there, and I believe the name for it was the Ojibwe Glacial Lake.
Nice.
And that lake was larger than than Great Lakes. It was huge.
Jeez. No kidding.
So as things were there, say at that time, you definitely have a heavy saturation of water in the area, and that's one of the things that Ontario and the Canadian Shield is known for. It's known for being very hydrologically complex. There's a lot of water, a lot of lakes, like huge amount of lakes, rivers, creeks, water bodies of every kind.
Yeah, it makes the
so at a certain point, at a certain point, there definitely would have been a substantial route going to the Ottawa River. That's without doubt.
Yeah. No, it really makes the drive up north really spectacular, just with all the lakes that you pass along the way. And then I noticed there was another small lake that we noticed here in the picture. And I was looking at it, and I was thinking about the King Solomon's thing, and it kind of reminded me of King Solomon's Temple. So I just put a picture of King Solomon's Temple next to the mountain and that smaller lake. And it's funny how similar they look. I guess it could just be a coincidence, but it seems like there's a lot that could be connecting to King Solomon here.
Well, personally, I found, this feature that you're talking about on top of the mountain, I found it to be, it's quite interesting looking, for sure. It's very interesting looking. I'd even say it's slightly peculiar looking, for sure.
Yeah.
It obviously looks very, very old.
Oh yeah.
So there would be a high degree of erosion on it, and if it was carved out, say, a few or several thousand years ago. It's at the least it's a very interesting feature for sure. And usually when it comes to things in Canada, in Northern Ontario, you can't be sort of deceived by the surface level, because there has been so much erosion, so much destruction that's gone on here.
It still does.
And, yeah, and there's such extremes of weather. Like, people don't realize the extremes of weather that we get here. We're literally will be minus 50 degrees centigrade in the winter, and then in the summertime, it's not unusual for it to climb up to plus 45 degrees, like literally sweltering, boiling hot weather, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at a feature like that, something that you're trying to identify, like this potential offering table, you've got to take into account that it's not going to look obvious. It's going to look peculiar. It's going to catch your eye. It's going to catch your attention, but it's not going to be obvious. There's going to be a lot of erosion, and there's going to be a lot of weathering to it, especially if it's very old.
Yeah.
So that's people can jump to conclusions and say, "Oh, that's just a natural formation." Maybe not. Maybe it is something. Maybe it is an offering table.
Yeah, like if I found it anywhere else on the mountain, I probably wouldn't even given it a second glance. But just because it was like right on the apex, well, the clearest spot, like basically the nicest view on the whole mountain, and it's right on the edge. So to me, that was like the perfect spot. If you're going to put one, that's where it should be. Right?
It seems consciously selected.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I'm going to throw in there, it's actually one of the things, the teasers that I gave you over the past week about some information that you're not aware about, that I'm going to present to you for the first time right now.
Okay, cool.
Just to kind of corroborate to a certain degree what you're saying about an offering table and this sort of carved looking basin in this unusual or interesting spot on the mountain. The information I'll present to you right now is that there actually is very old lore that has to do specifically with the top of the mountain, having to do with the indigenous people.
Wow.
And again, this is apparently a very old piece of lore, kind of the, in quote unquote, in very old times, which when the indigenous people say in very old times, they're talking about usually probably thousands of years ago. Okay?
Yeah.
So a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
And so here's the very interesting story that I think you're going to find fascinating. Okay. And I think you're probably going to have whole new things to perhaps look for when you next go to the mountain or try to check out anyway. So in these very old times, there's a tale of the Great Spirit itself, the Great Being. I'll inform listeners that in the Anishinaabe, or the native indigenous people of this larger region and of this province, the Ojibwe and the other Anishinaabe, what they call the creator, they have a few different names for. One of them is Kiche Manitou.
Yeah, Manitou being spirit,
Yeah, as a rough translation, spirit. It means great spirit, creator. It also means great being of mystery. A Manitou is also a mystery. It's a presence. It's a mystery. It's an experience as well as a being. So it means kind of a little more deeply than just spirit. But what happened on this mountain, apparently in very old times, is that the Great Spirit, the Creator, itself manifested over and upon the summit of Mount Cauldron.
Wow.
What was happening at the time is that there were some people that I guess had been involved in some kind of battle or war or raid of some kind.
Okay.
Let's just say things weren't going well for them. They were being slaughtered. So what they did was that they escaped and they retreated up to the top of this mountain, which was already sacred to them. Okay. So we're talking about a sacred mountain. They knew it as a sacred mountain. Again, we know that people were there for at least 6,000 years. So these people went up to their sacred mountain to hide and to try to avoid being slaughtered.
Yeah.
While they were up there, they were obviously, after a while, they were suffering. They were getting hungry, they were getting thirsty, they were suffering, and it looked as though that they were probably going to die there. They were probably going to starve or thirst to death, and that their enemies would have to do very little, because all they'd have to do is just keep them sieged up on top of the mountain.
Okay.
Now, these people, being on their sacred mountain, cried out to the great being of mystery, cried out to Kichie Manitou, to the great spirit.
Yeah.
And a great storm formed before their eyes. A great storm, and it enveloped the mountain. It covered the mountaintop. And it caused the mountaintop to become like night. And within this storm, on this sacred mountaintop where these people were, Kichie Manitou appeared to them, manifested to them in the form of the Thunderbird over the mountaintop. So the Thunderbird itself, the creator choosing this form to appear to them within the storm, the Thunderbird itself, massive Thunderbird, appeared over the mountaintop, and it communed and communicated with the people. Probably, I would imagine there was some elders with those people. There were probably, a medicine man, a shaman there as well. But the Great Spirit, the Creator, communed and communicated with the people. And what he did, and this is where it gets interesting for you, is what the Creator did was to help them with their thirst, to help them with their hunger. He created a basin within the very top of the mountain for them.
No kidding.
He created a basin there. And I would imagine that the way he created the basin was probably what we were talking about earlier, being the Thunderbird coming in a storm, is that he used the plasma and the electricity to form this basin for them, to carve it out of the mountaintop.
Oh, yeah, that would explain.
Within this basin, he put in fresh water. Also, what he did was that he put in the fresh water, and he put in fish for them, freshwater fish, to eat, to live on, to live and survive the attack and their isolation, their exposure to the elements. So within this basin, he filled with fresh water, and filled it with fish as well.
Yeah. That's incredible, because there's a lot of food actually on the top of that mountain if you go there today. Like, the best wild blueberries that I've ever eaten in my life grow massively, like abundantly on the top. And then there's also the Amantia muscara mushrooms, like the magic mushrooms, basically.
They're growing mushrooms.
Yeah, they're growing right next to the offering table also. So I was wondering, like, who planted those blueberries and who brought the mushroom spores, or did it happen naturally?
When it comes to the Amanita muscaria mushroom, it's also known as the fly agaric mushroom. Yeah. Those grow. This is pretty interesting too. This is pretty cool, so I'm going to throw this in here.
All right, cool.
They grow spontaneously overnight.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, and it's almost magical the way they appear. They just like poof, they're there, and they grow normally around pine trees and white birch trees.
All right.
Okay. But the interesting thing is what they grow from a storm.
Yeah,
they grow after a storm. These mushrooms pop up suddenly, instantaneously, practically overnight, or in a very, very short amount of time, with storms.
Yeah.
And there's this whole folklore about that, and how the Thunderbird is actually related in through the lore to the Amanita muscaria through the fly agaric sacred mushroom. Yeah. It's the mushroom that shamans used. It's also no coincidence that the form, the icon, the glyph of the Thunderbird is it's kind of an analog of the sacred shamanic birdman image I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. No, I think I just had one on the screen up there a second ago. Let's see.
So I thought you would find that very interesting, the fact that within the ancient lore of the Ojibwe people themselves, they say that, one, this was a sacred mountain, that the creator actually appeared upon that mountain, and that he created a basin upon the mountaintop. The mountaintop itself is almost like a table itself.
No, I actually
it's
got
almost like an altar. When you look at it, it almost looks like an altar in a way.
Yeah. So the creator bringing the food to the top, and then the mushrooms sprouting after the storm, is basically
and being connected to the Thunderbird itself. Yeah.
It matches the legend.
Did you notice when you were up there? Are there white birch trees up there? There's probably evergreens like coniferous and pine. But did you notice if there's white birches up there?
I'm not actually familiar too much with tree species. Like, I can tell softwood and hardwood apart from each other, but I'd have to go back up there and check. I know there was one maple tree that really stood out, which I was surprised to find one there. But then the rest seemed like, pine species. I'd have to check if there's another kind like that.
Okay. Yeah, check to see, like, take a look and get some photographs so that you know what a white birch is. The white birch is one of the easiest trees to identify.
I know,
because it has like a vellum-like white paper for its bark.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Birch trees I'm familiar with, but I would have to make sure there'd be a white birch, I guess. No, it really hit home when you were telling me that whole story about the Thunderbird showing up. It was almost like
there's actually folklore with the white birch tree and the Thunderbird as well. Jeez. So if there are white birches up there, you're going to get multiple connections to the Thunderbird. You're going to get multiple connections to Kitche Manitou, or the Thunderbird being one of his most powerful messengers.
Yeah, I was actually getting a little bit choked up there when you were telling me about that, because like when I was up on the top of the mountain and I did my shamanic experience stuff or tests, it's like my dreams changed dramatically, and they led me to go to Manitoulin Island. And then on that island, they have a legend about the prophet, what's his name? Shawanasawi. I don't know if you're familiar with him or.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically in that legend, it says the same thing, that he had to go to Dreamer's Rock. And then when he was fasting there, he was visited by the great Thunderbird. And then when the creator was showing him messages, he showed it to him in a pool. He's like, come glance in this pool and I'll show you what the future is going to be. So. It's like
that's called scrying. There's a term for that. It's called scrying.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
That's where you receive visions and very powerful images and otherworldly images when you gaze into a reflective surface, such as a mirror, or a black mirror, obsidian mirror, or
so you're familiar with
a basin of water, a calm basin of water. You gaze into it, and it's called scrying. Yeah. And after a while,
do you know what
if you're doing it right?
Have you ever heard what the best liquid is to use for that, or no?
Well, that's a whole subject. The best thing to do with scrying in, let's say, an aqueous liquid like water, is that you would charge the water. Oh. You would ritually charge the water. There's a way you go about that. You can use the sun, you can use the moon, starlights, certain parts of the year, such as equinoxes and solstices, certain parts of the day when there's certain planetary alignments. There's a variety of ways that you can charge them that are very specific to the purpose that you'd be using them for.
Okay.
But you charge them, and you also first cleanse them as well. That can be done with cedar and other things, but
maybe sacred tobacco or something like that. Huh?
Yeah, and you would want to charge the water. There's a variety of ways that you can do that. One of the simplest ways is that, say on a particularly potent full moon, you could gather natural water, let's say from a river, under the full moon.
Yeah.
And you do it with intention. You do it with visualizing, and intending very strongly what your purpose is for this.
Jeez.
And you have to put it in the proper container, though. Copper is best to put the water in. By far, copper is best. Actually, sorry, I'll amend that. Crystal is best. Copper would be next best, and then after that would be something like glass.
Okay,
or
cool.
if you have earthenware or whatever, but glass would definitely be better than earthenware.
Yeah, that's really wild. No, when I was checking the scientific data on what's the best reflective liquid to use, it's actually the most advanced telescopes in the world today use liquid mercury, because liquid mercury is super reflective too. And it was funny how so many ancient cultures were fascinated with liquid mercury too, so I was wondering if there's maybe a connection to that. Yeah, but anyways.
Yeah, well, mercury, for one thing, besides the obvious, reflective qualities of mercury, the second thing about mercury, or sometimes known as quicksilver, is that it's able to conduct electricity and bioelectrical energy. Very, very much. So if you've got something going on, and there's a supernatural manifestation that's going on, or the veil is becoming very thin between worlds, this could very much conduct that electricity and increase the energy and the charge of what's going on at that time.
No kidding. Well, yeah, what I did is I ordered a heavy metal test kit too. So next trip I go up, I'm going to test the water that's in the basin and see if it has any traces left of mercury.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. Really good idea. Scrape the bottom of it. Just make sure that you don't spoil any of your samples. Keep everything really, really hygienic and clinical. But scrape the bottom of it. Take little scraping samples of the rock itself. Whatever you can get it. Contain them really, really, really well. And then do your testing.
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Thanks. No, and then the other slide I put on the screen too was a picture that I got from Wikipedia. And it's the Anishinaabe, or they listed as Ojibwe too, cosmology. And then I just compared it to like the Mesopotamian version. I was surprised how like the Birdman looks very similar in these images. And you've got like I don't know, how the Turtle Island basically symbolized as the base of the sacred tree. I just found it amazing how similar the two were.
The cosmologies of the Ojibwe, I'll talk specifically about the Ojibwe. My ex was an Ojibwe woman.
Yeah.
And so I had, let's just say I had some very positive access to many parts of their lore and their elder teachings because of who she was and because of who her relatives were. And the Ojibwe cosmology bears a very interesting, very fascinating similarity and correspondences, we'll say, correspondences to other cosmologies, specifically shamanic cosmologies, but in general, spiritual cosmologies across the world, including the indigenous European cosmologies, the indigenous Slavic cosmologies, Middle Eastern cosmologies, Near Eastern cosmologies, and other Mediterranean cosmologies. It's very, very intriguing, the correspondences between them.
Yeah, another one I put on the screen too is the comparison between those cosmologies with the Zoroastrians. And it's basically the ancient people from Iran. And I was surprised, like even on the pillars, they put the moon and the sun on the same side.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's exactly what we were talking about earlier with the twin pillars being the pillars of opposites, being the pillars of diametrics. Sun, moon, solar, lunar, light, darkness, positive, negative, male, female, all the way down the line.
Yeah.
And in between is the central pillar that I was talking about earlier, which is the union of the two, which creates the third force, which creates a new thing, and that's how the consciousness of the seeker is opened. Yeah. And you can compare these things to the human body as well.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I noticed that the sacred tree often incorporates the human spine into its design, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, through and through. It's
Yeah.
actually interesting that in one of the ancient texts, I believe it's the scrolls of Qumran, which are basically the Dead Sea Scrolls
Wow.
by the Essenes, the Middle Eastern Essenes,
Yeah.
a highly religious sect. And one of the translations, which corresponds to the biblical New Testament, has Jesus talking to his disciples, the Christ speaking to his disciples, which bear an uncanny resemblance to the 12 houses of the zodiac and the 12 gods of the zodiac. But anyway,
Yeah.
the Christ, or the Lord, or the Lord of the gods, the Christ, he's speaking to them, and when he performs a miracle, and he gives sight to a blind man,
Yeah.
to a person that can't see. Now, you can interpret that two ways: someone that's literally blind, can't see, or someone that's blind to the other side, someone that can't see the other worlds. He gives them sight into the other worlds. But one of the first things that they say is, when their sight returns and they turn around and they see people walking around, the blind man compares the people to walking trees. He compares them to trees. He first sees them as trees,
Huh.
which I find very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, that is. No, I'm glad you brought up the biblical connection there too, because we had a slide that we were looking at earlier, how like a fire temple used in the Bible was sort of like on an elevated pillar, or not pillar, platform.
Yes.
And then we got that same sort of thing going on at the Mount Kemminus, where like that you can see the outline here on this above picture shows the whole area is almost like elevated on a platform too, right?
It is. It's literally located on a raised plateau.
Yeah.
And like I was saying earlier, I find that Mount Cauldron really, it does. If you take off the vegetation at the top, like it's obviously it's a volcanic core that remains, which in and of itself is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
But it, to me, it looks like an altar. It
Yeah.
looks like a raised altar. It looks like there's a reason why, many reasons in this case, why the ancient indigenous people would select it and use it as a sacred mountain.
Yeah.
A mountain of power, of supernatural power.
Yeah, I actually was getting some slides together for an Easter special, but I guess maybe I'll show one now just as a little sneak peek. Yeah, like at Easter time, Jesus, like in the whole sacrifice mythology or thing, history, I guess, if basically what Jesus did in his last miracle before he was taken into custody and killed, for anyone who doesn't know the Bible, is he transformed into a light being on top of a sacred mountain. So then
Transfiguration.
yeah, the Transfiguration. So I happened to look that mountain up recently and compared it, and man, does it ever look a lot like Mount Cauldron.
I would hazard a guess that certain mountains were highly sought after by the ancient and archaic and prehistoric peoples.
Yeah.
Including, I mean, the more classical civilizations that we're aware of, such as Sumer and Babylon and so on and so forth. But I would hazard a very, very confident guess that certain mountains were highly prized, highly sought after, not only for their shape, but shape and composition and
Elevation too. Yeah, it's almost
elevation.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
to be closer to be elevated up into the atmosphere, up into the sky, and elevated between heaven and earth, in and of itself is a powerful thing.
Cool.
Especially when they were performing rituals upon such an altar-like table of a mountain, that at certain points, I would imagine that some pretty heavy-duty events took place.
Yeah, most definitely.
And that's part of part of the fact of being elevated between heaven and earth, being elevated on a volcanic mountain.
Yeah. No, it's wild too. My aunt brought up that a lot of the places in Europe, like the Stonehenges and all those different megaliths, are also set up on highly volcanic or previously volcanic activity. So it seems like, yeah, the volcanoes and all that definitely tie in.
Oh, it's no surprise.
Yeah.
Volcanoes are highly, highly, highly electrical in
Yeah.
nature. A lot of, if you look up images of some really serious volcanic eruptions going on, where the magma is just spewing and erupting from it.
Yeah, there's
One,
lightning.
you'll see that there's massive lightning discharge, massive plasmic discharge.
Okay.
It's conducting electricity, and that, interestingly, kind of going with what we were saying earlier, that storms will form. Electrical storms will form over the volcano, and electrical storms will form over the magma, and we'll have exchange with it. We'll have electrical, massive plasmic exchange with it.
Wow. Yeah, that's something else. No, then one of the last slides I got here on the Mount Kemnitz before we do the Stonehenge stuff quick. It's basically a picture I put just lining up where the sun's shadow goes and the sun's path. And I think that on the winter solstice, there's a chance that the path of the sun is going to go right over the offering table and then set directly over the Draco Stonehenge. But I'm going to have to confirm that with software or actually going there and seeing it in person. But that's just one of my guesses.
You know what? I'd really like to see if that's the case. I wouldn't doubt it, but I'd definitely like to see if that's the case.
No, I got to get a hold of that software so I can test it out, because that would help rather than having to wait to go there.
Yeah, it's out there. Well, that's what the software is for, right? For people that are like you and I, where we explore these places, we go out to these places. For me, it's kind of like remote viewing,
Nice.
where I look at everything remotely first, and I go through it with a fine-tooth comb. I do all my study and research that I can, but I definitely use these programs, these astronomical and these satellite programs, to the maximum. There's some programs I use that show various filters of the landscape as well.
Cool.
So you can see the land in many, many different ways, not just its obvious physical covering, not just the rocks and the trees, but you can see them through layers of whether it's topography, whether it's magnetic distribution, whether it's certain types of trees or certain growths of trees, whatever it is. And the astronomical stuff as well. It's definitely a powerful tool in the belt of any serious explorer.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I'm really interested to hear if you can actually find that out, because the reason we're talking right now is because I am planning a trip to the mountain myself this summer.
Nice. Yeah, I can hardly wait to see what you find there. Man. Right,
I'm pretty interested myself, because when I go there, usually when I go on these trips, I make them very, very hardcore expeditions. And
I did that.
I don't limit myself to what I may try.
No, last trip I made up was actually in October, and I managed to go by myself, and I didn't have any vehicle, so I just basically got dropped off there and had to do the walking. So I managed to walk from my place to the Draco Stonehenge, and then walked all the way to the Kemnitz offering table, and then back again. So it was about 30 kilometers of walking I managed to pull off.
It's a good walk.
But man, it made it a heck of an experience. Like, I did the fasting as well too, so I could get more of like a spiritual experience on the mountain.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, it's amazing. Even with all that fasting and all that walking, when I got to the top of the mountain, I had so much energy. It's like, I don't know, adrenaline or what it is, but you definitely...
your spirit was stoked,
Yeah. It's like you're definitely not going to get bored doing something like that. Man. Okay,
no,
so...
if you do, you're doing something wrong.
No, and here's one of the images that I took with the drone that I brought up in August. Or no, that was the October trip. So I was able to fly it over the Stonehenge site and get a better perspective of what the blocks at ours look like. And my theory is that it's the constellation Draco, but we're still going to have to do more precise measurements to actually to I guess clarify that for sure. And then it was wild too. I was just gonna sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I contacted the one of the writers for the Timmins Times, and she did a article about this place too. And she mentioned that there was actually a survey that was done by the government in 1990. And then after they got the results, the results were not readily available. So people are getting a hard time trying to find out what the results of all these detailed maps of the stones actually look like. And then what the government did after that too is they removed all the signs leading to the Draco Stonehenge, and they also allowed all the trees to grow in, so that it's going to hide it from vandals, was their explanation. So yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say that's basically why this picture is like so hard to tell what it looks like, is most of the trees have already grown in and blocked a lot of the Stonehenge just for perspectives, for taking pictures. And if it wasn't for the drone, I probably would have never noticed that it took that shape.
Oh, the drone is going to be your friend for this.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. The best time for you to go is going to be in the springtime before the blossoms, before all the trees start to blossom and bud with the foliage, or in the fall time after all the foliage has fallen.
Yeah, that's actually
take it from me. Yeah, take it from me, as I do a lot of outdoor adventuring. I go out to far-flung places in the middle of nowhere, and the difference in being able to see in your perspective on the landscape around you is literally like night and day if you go when there's no foliage.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even stress how much of a difference it will make in you trying to get photographic evidence of the megaliths.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's spectacular up at Mount Keminis, because if you go in the spring, it looks different. If you go in the fall, it looks different. If you go in the fall when all the colors have changed, it's incredible up there. Yeah.
It's gorgeous landscape.
Yeah. No, then one of the other pictures I got on the screen here is one of the giant blocks that makes up this Draco Stonehenge. And I put it up here just to clarify that one of the reasons people know that it wasn't naturally forming is there's balance stones, like the shape of a pyramid, that are holding or propping up the rocks on like a specific angle. So I don't think too many cases in nature that you're going to get rocks propped up on top of each other like that. Yeah, and then I got another picture that shows that there's face features in the blocks here. And that's like another common theme that you find at Stonehenge in England and our other megalithic sites, is rocks that almost look like faces are looking back at you on them.
Yeah, and again, you'd be dealing with a lot of erosion too, so it's
who knows what it used to look
possible.
like. No, and I used to have a picture too of one of the friends that I was with at the Stonehenge showing how big these blocks are. But she didn't want me to share it, but just for perspective-wise, it's like when she stood next to the rock is like twice as big as her, or almost 3 times. So some of them are actually really big boulders, and they wouldn't have been easy to move.
Oh, the true megaliths.
Yeah.
By definition, they're true megaliths. They're massive stones.
No, and it's neat that we got this Stonehenge and offering table, and people were asking like, what connection could there be between the two? And then I happened to notice that the Stonehenge in England, when you restore the shape with like computer animation, it matches the same shape as the offering tables. So like if you compare it to the one here from the Roman period, it's got like an internal section and then rims going around the edge. The square and circle is a little bit different, but I think the general shape is pretty much the same.
No, the same concept. That's a very prolific shape throughout cultures in the world, actually.
Yeah. No, it's like really you find it everywhere. Even the Vatican has designed their layout to look the same shape, so it's kind of funny how that works.
And they know why. They know why exactly they did it like that.
Now, one day what I would like to do is go get a pass into the Vatican archive and just spend like a month reading there, but I don't think they allow that.
I doubt that. Somehow I doubt it.
All right. Yeah, so that's basically all the slides that I got for today. Sorry I ran a little bit long on time. I think we're over 2 hours now, but I really appreciate you going through all that information, especially
But Leland.
Yeah?
Leland, we're not done yet.
Yeah, you still had some information on giant legends in the area? Yeah, I
I
can't
still
forget that
have a
part.
very valuable piece of information for you that I didn't tell you last night. I held it back from you. I teased
Okay.
you with it, but I held it back for you now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
if you still got time, I got all the time in the world for this. So yeah, if you're up for telling it.
let's do it. This is
All
happening
right.
now. Here we are, and we've gone through the trouble of doing this. So let's squeeze everything we can out of it.
We saved the best for last.
Well, it's definitely it's a piece of information that I think is going to really excite you.
All right.
It definitely ties directly into your theory and to the megaliths, to the henge, if we want to call it a stone henge.
Yeah.
And okay, it's one. First of all, I'll sort of preface it by saying it's already established that there's something to these stones. There's something to their formation.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Not haphazard. There's something going on there.
Yeah.
The fact that the government would hire and pay top dollar for a team to map it out in detail. The fact that there is also pre-existing folklore about these stones to begin with.
Yeah.
All of it points to the fact, and to see the stones, and especially the aerial view, like the drone view that you did. It's obvious that okay, there's something going on here. This is a structure that was consciously and intelligently done. It was done for a purpose, and there seems to be alignments going on. Okay, so that's all there.
Yeah.
Now, what I found out last night from someone that has very deep connections into the Ojibwe culture in Ontario, Northern Ontario, is that, and you're really going to like this, the stones, okay, the megaliths, actually, there is lore. There is old Ojibwe lore and tradition that ties the megaliths, first of all, to a north-south alignment. Okay? So the lore is that, the tradition is that they were put there.
Yeah.
They were consciously, intelligently put there. They were aligned with a north and south axis. Okay.
Yeah.
Which
That's
in and of itself
yeah.
is significant. In and of itself, it's significant. That's meaningful in many different ways. But the most interesting part of it is what else they connect very directly. They connect this structure of megaliths to, and this is where I think you're going to find it very interesting.
All right.
They connect it to the North Star.
Ah.
They connect it to the Pole Star. The tradition connects it to the North Star, to the Pole Star.
Yeah, I had a guest on the show named Stein, and he researches the North or the Pole Star all the time. So if he's listening to the show, I'm thinking he's loving this part already.
Okay, well, this is where you're going to love it even more, Leland. Yeah. Is the obvious? Well, if anyone doesn't know, the North Star is very specifically related to the constellation of Draco.
Oh yeah.
Draco. One of the characteristics of Draco, the interesting things about Draco, is that Draco is very much a northern constellation.
Yeah, it's always visible in the northern hemisphere. Yeah.
Exactly. It's always up there in the north sky, but the question is, well, why is it always visible in the north sky? Well, that's where the connection comes in. The reason it's visible is because it rotates around the North Star. It curls about the North Star, the Pole Star. It's intimately connected to it. It coils about it. Now, this is, okay, so that in of itself, right away, you now have a direct connection from the tradition of the ancient people of this area that connects it to north-south alignment, connects it to the Pole Star, the North Star, which is completely connected to Draco, who wraps itself around it. The North Star is it's the pole of the night sky. It's where the night sky rotates around. So it's the very center. Shamanically, the center of a dome, let's say, is very much a portal into the other world. It's the axis. We're talking about the axis again. The axis mundi, the axis of the tree, the world being like a tree, the world tree. So it's an axis. It's a central point. Now, kind of just to show how much I like you and how much I wanted to get some really interesting information for you, I'm going to go even further than that, and I'm going to intrigue you even more.
Great.
Going a little bit deeper now. Okay, so we look at it. The constellation of Draco wraps around the pole star.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very cool in and of itself. Now, if we go back in time, I think it's 4,000 to 5,000 years. Let's say around 5,000 years. I might have the range a little bit wrong, but about 5,000 years. The North Star, that's now the pole star, was not the pole star back then.
Oh, really?
Okay, so we're talking ancient times, okay? We're talking about the times where Sumer is said to have sort of sprang up and sort of that 5,000 year sort of delineation point of prehistoric, more prehistoric and archaic times into the things such as Sumer and Babylon and Mesopotamia and Acadia and all that. It was sort of like this sort of 5,000 year boundary. So we're talking in ancient times. Okay, and it's interesting because the people that resided around Mount Cauldron and around that area, I've already said earlier that it's been archaeologically, scientifically, academically proven that they've been there for at least 6,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're right away these times match up. So they were there at this time. Now, the pole star that used to be the pole star around that time, okay, which times in very, very nicely with the glacial melt and when that land would have been exposed for people to be residing there, to be settling there, such as the ancient indigenous people.
Yeah.
At that time, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, the pole star was located. I'll give it the name first. The pole star was Thuba. Thuba is in the body of Draco. It's actually in the body of the constellation Draco. So now we're talking about not only is the tradition of the ancient people there directly connected to the pole star. When they were ancient, the pole star was in the constellation of Draco.
So that would explain, why they.
So there is obviously a direct connection of these megaliths, according to the transmission and the tradition and the knowledge, which should be trusted as much as anything else. That these megaliths were connected to the constellation Draco and the North Star.
Jeez, yeah, that's incredible. Because I'm still at the point where I wasn't sure if it was Draco. So now with all this information, that really helps narrow it down, right?
Well, this gives you this basically throws fuel on the fire for you to go and get all of the evidence you can, all of the coverage you can. Go there at the right time so that you can get the best non-vegetated as much as possible photos of the megaliths and kill it. Just go there and get everything you can, because there is tradition and lore that's pre-existing and has existed for a long time that backs this up.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely going to keep working on it. It's basically all I do these days.
Well, it's hard to say no to a mystery, right?
Yeah.
True mystery.
No, once you get into researching it, it's like you're hooked. It's like an addiction. You can't stop, right? It's like, I don't know. Some days I wish I wouldn't spend so much time on it, but when I get discoveries and people on the show like you, it's like it seems worth it. That's for sure.
Well, you have to make a choice, right?
Yeah.
Just like everything, you have to choose the way you're going to live your life. You have to choose how you're going to spend your time.
Yeah.
And your choice is your own. Your power of choice, your freedom of choice is your own. And
True.
And there's the old saying, your focus determines your reality, and what consumes your thoughts controls your life. So if you're making choice to spend your time doing a certain thing, that's what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna get that, and you're going to develop in that. And if you choose to dedicate your time to a mystery like this, to a search and a quest like this, if you focus your time and spend your time with that, you will develop in that area too.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that. And was there some more to this about giants too, or was that a different thing?
I was wondering. I was actually waiting to see if you were going to remember.
No,
Yes.
someone I had on the show, Heather Arnold, she talked a lot about the ancient sites in, what is it, Aruba? She's got a book,
Aruba, yes.
yeah, she's got a book coming up about that. And
I've spoken with Heather
Oh,
a
yeah.
few times in the past.
Cool, yeah, so she talks about the legends of red-haired giants and associated with these megaliths and with gold mines. So we got the gold up here, so I was always wondering, was there...
Oh, we got all kinds of gold up here.
Yeah. So the only thing I was missing was the legend about the red-haired giants, or giants in general, I guess.
Well, let me help you out with that, Luna.
All right.
Okay, just give me one quick moment here.
Sure.
And, oh, I already have it. I'm ahead of myself. Okay, so I avoided saying it earlier because I kind of I wanted us to get to a point where we sort of painted a picture of Ontario, Northern Ontario, in some of its prehistoric aspects.
Okay.
How much of a strange and bizarre and powerful land it was prehistorically, and
Yeah.
how there's many mysteries in this land prehistorically. Now that we've sort of painted a bit of a picture of that, we're going to return to Temagami,
All right.
which isn't that far away.
Yeah.
Geologically, it's part of the same geologic region. So it's distance-wise, it's not that far away. Geologically, it's tied. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's also interestingly tied to the Sudbury impact crater. But okay, so we're going to Temagami, and I've already said that among the indigenous people, the people of Temagami, the power there, the spiritual power there, is known as being very potent, very powerful.
Yeah.
Now, one of the legends, quote unquote legends, I like to call it lore or records, transmission of lore and knowledge, from the elders of Temagami, is again, the timing's interesting. 10,000 years ago, okay, so again, we're talking just after the end of the Ice Age, when the glaciers were beginning to diminish and retreat.
Exactly.
And you can bet your bottom dollar that as soon as the glacial wall began to diminish at all and open up and break up or retreat, that as soon as that happened, people wanted in.
Yeah.
They wanted to go see this land. They wanted to go settle it, plumb its treasures and its wildlife and everything it had to offer. So the legend begins 10,000 years ago. This is where it gets interesting. One, the date, okay, because it lines up perfectly.
Yeah.
And second, this part, when the mountains were erupting volcanoes. That's direct from their lore. So their lore corroborates what the science says.
Yeah.
They had this knowledge long before science knew about this.
Exactly.
So they're saying 10,000 years ago, their land, Northern Ontario, when the mountains were erupting volcanoes. So they were saying way back then, the land was filled with volcanoes and volcanic power. Such as formations such as the massive Nipissing Lake and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, from the volcanic age, these massive granite landscapes emerged. Okay, so you get this very prototypical Ontario Canadian Shield landscape. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Their lore records that at that time, giants were roaming their land.
No kidding.
The land that is now theirs. Giants were roaming the earth. And
Jeez.
it's kind of interesting that they say that the giants were planting the now towering trees of Temagami.
Holy.
And that these giants actually had a hand in some of the carving of the lake itself, because I guess they were probably carving it out of the volcanic landscape.
Jeez.
Okay, so they were carving into the granite and the igneous metamorphic landscape created by these erupting mountains of volcanoes. And the giants were there at that time. Immediately after, and as I said at the beginning of our conversation, I assert that probably during the Ice Age as well.
Yeah.
Now, the giants, the descendants of the giants, who they call Misabi, and I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but I'm just going to say Misabi.
Okay.
Okay? The descendants of the giants, the Misabi, are the Teme, Ogama, Anishinaabe. Teme, Ogama is Temagami. The Anishinaabe, the indigenous people of Temagami, they claim in their lore that they descended from the giants long, long, long ago.
Jeez, eh?
And they were given the responsibility by these giant predecessors, progenitors, to be custodians of the land.
Nice.
This land that was filled with mountains that were volcanoes. They were given knowledge and lore that caused them to understand the significance of the forest, caused them to understand the land itself.
Yeah.
And again, I repeat the fact that the medicine or the spiritual power of Temagami is considered very potent.
Yeah, no kidding.
And
that's incredible.
let's rewind quickly as well to the whole Temagami magnetic and gravitational anomaly, right?
All right.
So that's what we're at here. They're saying that 10,000 years ago, mountains were erupting volcanoes. From the volcanic age, these metamorphic granite and other igneous landscapes emerged and built the land. And during that time, giants were roaming, and they were actually carving out some of this landscape, planting massive towering trees of Temagami, and carving the landscape. From these giants' descendants, I guess there was some sort of a communion between the ancient peoples and these giants.
Wow.
They descended from them, and they became I would imagine, obviously now there's been a lot of dilution of that descent.
Yeah. Everywhere in the world, really.
10,000 years, thousands and thousands of years, there's been a massive dilution of that, but they are descended from that, and they were given knowledge by these prehistoric giants to understand the land and the forests.
Yeah, that's really incredible. I can't believe that part too about the giants carving the lakes. Like, did you watch my interview with that I did with Jeff on the Silver Surfer or the Silver Psyop show?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so I'll just bring up the slide I got from that, and we were talking about it. It's like the lake that's on Draco Stonehenge there has a shape in it that I thought looked a lot like a shaman. So I decided to compare it to other shaman images to see if I could find one that matches what's in the lake. And I'll show you what I found. It was actually with the help of J.J. Ainsworth. So here we have an image that there's a shaman in the lake right across from the Stonehenge, and it matches one of the shamans that you find in the Olmec culture. It's like his helmet is the same. You can see up here. I don't know if it's loaded on your screen yet.
It's not quite loaded. I'm just waiting. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can see that the shaman's got his jaw that's a little bit different, and it matches that helmet that the Olmec guy is wearing. He's got a nose piece that looks strange, and then I noticed the Olmec guy also has that strange nose piece. And the top of his head is almost shaped like a helmet, and that helmet shape matches the Olmec figure as well, even with the bun on the back and the little circle on the top. And he happens to be holding that magic bag that you used to fill the offering tables.
Very intriguing.
Yeah, so
it is part of the lore.
Yeah, it was like, how is this possible that the lake could be shaped into something? Like, it must have happened naturally. Like, there's no way someone could carve a lake. And then here you just talked about a legend where giants were apparently carving the lake, right?
Terraforming.
Yeah. It's like, I never.
Basically, there is lore that the ancients and giants did carve the land. They
Jeez,
carved
huh?
the land, they worked the land,
Huh.
and the kind of architecture that they created was what you would call an augmentation of the land, where they used the natural land, but then they worked with the natural land and they blended and added onto it to keep the natural landscape, but to sort of continue the natural landscape, and that
Yeah.
they worked the land itself.
It's like they incorporated the creator's design into their design and made it like a hybrid design, right?
Well, the what we're getting into here too is we're getting into the concept of things that are called like geoglyphs, where they're massive glyphs on a huge scale that you can only see from the air,
Yeah.
and we're getting into geological terraforming. If the ones that came later, the descendants of these ancient archaics, such as let's say giants, were able to create geoglyphs. When you go back to the truly powerful ones, there's no reason why, if you follow the logic, they would not be able to also create giant images carved, etched, and inscribed right into the land itself and alter the land.
Yeah. I believe that to be true. And even in cases like the moon. Have you ever seen the rabbit on the moon before or no?
I can't say that I have.
Oh, okay. I got a treat for you then. It's like, I'll bring it up here. It's like a common mythology that you find in, what is it, Asia, like, and also in South America. See, I had it on one of my other shows. Yeah, here it is. And it's neat too that it ties into the sacrifice tradition where it's like people always wonder why the rabbit is associated with sacrifice. Most people think of it associated with Playboy or something. But it's basically here, I put up a slide and I'll wait for it for you to load. But it basically shows that there's an image that's been engraved on the surface of the moon that shows a rabbit sitting next to an offering table. And the reason was, in Asian legends, it says that the rabbit offered itself into a fire so that it was drawn onto the moon for all to see. And the Aztec tradition was that the rabbit offered itself into a fire to save the life of Quetzalcoatl. So they also drew it on the moon. So it's like you have multiple cultures collaborating this idea that the gods or the giants are actually shaping our planet and even the moon, giving us symbols.
Terraforming.
Yeah.
Would you be able to zoom in on that image a little?
Sure.
A little more clearly?
Yeah, so there's the moon rabbit there, and it's like it's one of those symbols where anyone can go see it on a full moon. You don't have to travel anywhere to see it, right? I'm surprised that it's such a cool legend and it didn't really survive the eons. Like, not many people know about the rabbit on the moon, yet it's right in the open.
Well, when you start getting into lore and folklore and traditions like that, it really is a matter of being able to really transliterate and translate the language that's used, the images and the symbols, and kind of the mechanics of their language, and there's a lot that are embedded in the lore that is misunderstood because of just faulty transliteration and translation and understanding of what they're saying. There's a certain esoteric backdrop to it all that you kind of have to have a comprehension of.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of what's discovered later was contained within lore for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And they'll end up finding it later. I mean, that's how they discovered the first black hole.
Oh,
was
really?
that they discovered it by an indigenous tribe in Africa.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they had specific rituals that enacted something of a map, and their glyphs, their depictions, their images that they drew and they used specifically showed a very obvious telltale sign of a specific area in space.
Wow.
In that they were saying about something that was going on mechanically within this specific area of space. And through their descriptions, they got an exact location of it. And then through, again, some creative translation of what they were saying, they realized that what they were describing was like some kind of a celestial body that pulled light and things into itself.
Yeah.
Like a whirlpool kind of effect. It attracted and it pulled things into itself. And when they finally started really, really looking into it, that's where the first black hole was discovered.
Jeez, no kidding. Now, it's neat how like the clues to our history seem to be hidden within each culture around the world too, right? If you study just your own culture, it's like you're not going to find out the answers. But if you start comparing it to, say, African culture or Asian, it's like that's when you really start putting the pieces together. Right?
It's like each civilization, each culture, and each age had gifts.
Yeah.
It's
like the creator gave a piece to the puzzle to everyone and forced us to work together to solve it.
I believe at one time it was united, and then through the cycles of the ages, it became disintegrated and divided, and it decayed and broke into pieces. And the civilizations and the cultures also went through an entropy or a decay, where this body of knowledge that's fundamental to our existence became broken apart into pieces. And some of it's lost permanently, but some of it is not.
Yeah, a viewer just mentioned the Dogon tribe. They have a lot to do with the Sirius connections too.
Well, that's who I was talking about.
Yeah. So that's
the Dogon tribe.
Cool. Now, I put on the screen too another image that I like with the terraforming idea. Most people just see a mountain range on this one, but I was researching it a bit, and apparently, I guess I'll have to wait a second for it to load, but it basically looks like a First Nations guy laying down next to his horse once you put all the lines onto the map over it.
I mean, you know what? It's possible. It's possible because we're talking about vast ages of time and things that could have occurred back then that seem now to us extraordinary or unbelievable or incomprehensible.
Yeah.
But back then, you're talking about an entirely different world. Like we kind of spoke about at the beginning of this discussion that they were in a completely, radically different world, a radically different reality way back in those primeval times. And, so if we're seeing something that maybe could be that, there would be massive erosion on it, and it would appear to be just a natural form at this point.
Yeah, and then the whole Turtle Island mythology too. It's crazy how when you look at North America from above, it actually takes the shape of a turtle. So it's like
it is interesting.
Yeah, like did the shamans do the experience of like out of body in order to see the shape of the turtle, or did they actually get it from the legend, like from the creator himself? It's kind of interesting how they managed to come up with that.
Probably both.
Yeah.
Because it is pretty striking. The image is striking, and that's probably the landform was distorted over time as well, and probably at one time the image was probably striking.
Yeah, even more so, probably. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're getting really long on time here, and I think we covered everything. Or was there something more that you wanted to add as well?
Let me take a quick check.
Sure.
Just to make sure.
Yeah, and if you ever want to come back on the show again to share some more research, it's like you're more than welcome anytime. It's like I pretty much put my show ahead of everything, so.
Okay, thank you. I definitely appreciate that invitation.
Cool. And if you got any projects you're working on too, like are you still doing the film and television stuff, or?
I've fallen away from that. I'm doing other ventures now, which kind of get more specifically into my exploration and my exploits, I'll say. But Yeah, I'm definitely going to be taking a deeper, a whole new level to my exploration over the coming time. I'm kind of in a transitional period right now,
Yeah.
but my exploration is definitely going to be deepening. And yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person where when I do these things, when I study these things, when I research these things, I want to go and live them after.
Yeah.
And when I go out there, and I'm prepared, like, on foot, on ground, up close and personal,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm prepared to, put life and limb at risk and to stretch my neck out and do what I have to do to explore these mysteries, these places, and these events or circumstances. So definitely there's going to be a lot of that happening, a lot more of that happening. It's going to be ramped up. So I'll keep you in the loop, and I'll keep you updated.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I put on the ticker there your website or Facebook page so that people can get in touch with you. That's probably the best way, right?
That's probably the best way.
Yeah.
They can friend me, no problem, and yeah, we can communicate through there.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll add the website or a Facebook link to the show description after we wrap it up here too. And
I'd appreciate that.
yeah, cool. And
So
yeah,
I hope.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there's anything else you want me to add to it in the future, just give me a shout and I can update it.
Oh, that's also appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, yeah, I hope, like I was saying earlier, I see information as a form of currency, sort of a non-physical form of currency.
Yeah, it's a cool way to
And
look at it.
I hope that, well, very much in old times, that's exactly what it was. If you had something to come and share with someone or information to give them, it was considered valuable. It was considered a form of currency. And if you offered that to a person, then there would be an exchange. There was an exchange, an interaction between the people. They would offer something back. There was a barter and trade. So it was definitely a commodity and a currency.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to say in closing that I hope that the information that I was able to offer to you was very pertinent to your research, pertinent to your theories, and maybe helped, maybe blow them out of the water a little.
Yeah, no, like, I don't know, it's hard to express, like, how thankful I am for everything that you shared, like,
I'm very happy to, Leland. I'm very, very happy to.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try to get some more information for you for another exchange soon, right?
Well, you use well what was shared here, and let it soak in, let it sink in, and absorb it. And I have the sneaking suspicion that when it's added to the study, the research, and the work, the field work that you're doing, that it's going to it's going to help you kind of grow something more of a treasure, perhaps beyond what you thought you might be able to.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of confidence in that if you use this information well, everything that we talked about, and you stay focused and faithful to your search and your quest, that you will find you'll find the treasure that you're looking for. And that treasure isn't always physical treasure; it's often metaphysical treasure. And that's the priceless treasure that changes a person from the inside out. So I have a feeling that if you stay true, that you will find your treasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that, man. It's like not a lot of people support this type of work, so just even hearing a couple people say that really makes a big difference.
It's my pleasure, sir. My pleasure. I'm glad to have been here. Thank you very much for your hospitality and hosting this show.
Yeah,
I
anytime.
definitely appreciate it. And thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Cool. Yeah, I can't wait. Hopefully we can do another show soon, and hopefully I'll have maybe some information from Manitoulin Island that I can share too. I'm going to try to make that trip this year also.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah.
Hopefully I stay alive on this earth long enough for us to do that.
Yeah, you better be careful.
I tend to take a few risks, but
Oh yeah, I hear you there.
so far so good. But I would enjoy that. I would enjoy appearing on another show if fate and destiny will have it so.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how our research collaborates again in the future. Like, this episode is really unreal what we covered. It's like, man. Well, I guess I should let you go just so we don't run too far on time. I know most people, if it's over 3 hours, probably aren't going to want to sit through it. So,
Well, I guess if you I don't know if you post it online after.
yeah,
Some
it'll be
people
automatically posted as soon as it wraps up here.
Yeah,
And then,
I'd imagine some people will stick around for some of it, parts of it, or maybe even all of it.
yeah,
And if you give a good breakdown, a good summation, then I know for myself, from my personal experience with YouTube and viewing videos, if there's a good summation of it, that goes a long way in me actually watching that video.
yeah, yeah, that's true. There's definitely like a science behind it.
Oh, absolutely, it's a craft.
Yeah.
It's a craft. Okay, so yes,
All
I
right.
wish you a very good night. I thank you for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to be on your podcast, and
Cool.
it's been a blast.
All right. Take care, Dan. Nice to meet you. I really appreciate it.
You take care as well, Leland.
All right. Take care. See ya. Well, everybody, that was quite the show, I think. I'm almost at a loss for words again because, man, I was getting a little bit choked up there when Dan started telling me about what happened on the, geez, when that guy or when those people were stuck on the top of Mount Keminus and the Thunderbird came, and it's like that correlates so much to what I've found with Manitoulin Island, like the story of the Thunderbird coming, and it's like that's what I started dreaming about after being on top of the mountain. So the whole correlation to the giants, how that there actually was legends of or history of giants up in North America. What else did we cover? The Temagami anomalies. Like, holy crap! Like, those were pretty impressive too. And what else was there? It's like, man, there was so much that we talked about. I'm probably going to watch this episode like 10 times in order to absorb it all. So yeah, I guess I'll start wrapping up the show here just because we're getting so close on time. There was quite a few other things that, man, everything that's synchronized in this episode is almost unreal, man. All right, I think I got just about everything summarized that I needed to before the end here. Let's see. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, I'd just like to thank all the viewers too for all the awesome comments that everyone was adding to the show as we went. That was really cool. Sorry if I missed any of the comments. After the show, I'll try to go through it and make sure to give a response to everyone, not leave you hanging. And yeah, if everyone wants to go and check out Dan's Facebook page and give it a like and add him as a friend, and man, let's hope that he's able to come back on the show and he has some good times on his next adventures. Alright, so I guess that's about it for tonight's show, and I actually got another episode coming up on Friday, and we got one of the actors from the show Vikings who's going to be talking to us about High Brazil, and a little bit of other stuff to do with ancient Ireland, Stonehenge, and some more information that's going to connect to this. So yeah, if you can tune into that show and share this show, I really appreciate it, and hope everyone has a good night. Alright, take care. The Magi Show was brought to you by the Milky Way. I hate this galaxy.